Hey,
Hello. I
hello.
hope it's if I keep my video off for a while. I'm just finishing up dinner right now.
What are we eating?
Uh, I call it roti and sabzi. It's bread and vegetable, cooked vegetable.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to show you the plate because I just feel a little gross right now.
Do as you please. It's all good.
Thank thank you. Good to see everyone.
I'll show you what I'm eating. Let's pretend it's food. Julian,
Yeah.
how the hell are you doing?
How the hell am I doing?
Yeah, I saw that Instagram. Looks like you got crazy weather going on there.
Oh, the hail. Oh, I get it. I get
Yeah,
it.
see what I
Not
did?
not hail. Not Hale and Hardy. Hale and. Yeah, that's
Like
good.
flying ice balls.
That's good. It's like what the hell? And
Yeah.
I was on a Zoom with or whatever with a video call with a friend who's probably like maybe she's like 3 miles from here. And I was like, sorry, it's hailing. She's like, what? It's sunny over here. And I was like, yeah, it's hailing, and it was it's coming down sort of proper, and it was ice because I took Chewy the dog for a walk,
Hmm.
a couple hours later, and it said it's settled in, it was still there, um, and then she's like, it's hailing over here now, and I was like, it's sunny over here. It was very
You're
very
predicting each
strange,
other's weather.
yeah, very strange weather that we're having.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently there's like snow all the way down Southern California. Like there's snow predicted. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't see that, but it's like, yeah, it's wet and cold, so I guess that's gonna happen, but it's definitely like, and then these amazing clouds. It's like I was walking the dog and it's like, oh damn it. It's like,
Mhm.
and I just knew like probably like another 20 minutes by the time I get home, it's like gonna be too late for the drone to go up.
Nice. Were they the cumulonimbus clouds?
Huge billowy like pink ass cotton.
Oh,
Yeah, like cotton candy situation going on. I took a photo, but it wasn't that, but it was just
yeah.
not the same as taking a photo from like 200 feet in the
What is
air.
it? Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. Isn't that the old saying?
Pink sky at night,
Everything gonna be all right.
everything gonna be all right. Things gonna be all right.
That normal weather for California
Hell's
in
no, not southern and not coastal. We definitely you get some storms,
hmm,
like and it's been very windy all week, like crazy windy to where it's like
hmm.
you're looking at the neighbor's tree and being like, just stay there. Kind of windy.
So it
And
is freaky.
it's kind of freaky. It's a little bit freaky.
Hmm.
People walking on the street like strangers. That thing is like everyone is communing around a particular topic. Man, can you believe this? Whereas before you wouldn't give each other the time of day. Is everything all right with the family? It's like, now you're asking. When the burglar was knocking, you weren't asking. We got strange weather. Hey Matt,
Up in the
is this your first office hours? It's got to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Look at you. Are you wearing a tie or an ascot to your?
It's a I guess it was called the Manhattan or the Midtown uniform back in the 90s. I learned that from Seinfeld. And and I feel like it's ever since the pandemic when I show up at work on Zoom in this two-dimensional whatever, it helps me like I think it helps fill the void of like the routine that was lost of like commuting and
Right.
putting in a
Yeah.
podcast, and it makes me feel more important than I am, I think.
Yeah. Honey, where's my blue tie? I got a big meeting. It's like it's on Zoom. Yeah, but still.
Like, you're not wearing pants. Why do you have a top on with a tie?
Looking for my gold ascot. It's with the boss today.
I see you've got your Patagonia vest, which might as well be a suit and tie in the
Exactly.
world.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks for coming. Matt and I we chatted the other day, and it was kind of orthogonal, right? It was like it was more like because you knew a guy who I've been kind of hanging out with, in a kind of way around Amida.
That's right. It was
Yeah.
one of those weird synchronous situations where I had a question around kind of the app design, and when I got off the call, my wife was like, "Were you talking to your therapist? Who is that?" Like, well, you kind of touched on the tech piece briefly and then got it. Yeah, I think orthogonal is a good way to describe it. And then just general interest around what this is and the cool minds that are just involved. It was really sent me down a rabbit hole of interest. And I was just stoked too that there's a space like this to just kind of swap thoughts and keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
So what's
That's right.
your deal? What do you do?
For work, I help engineering teams hire leadership at Airbnb. And kind of how I got to Julian was through the Omada, which was just a kind of a trip because I was always interested in that product. My friend planted the seed, but seeing the kind of why Omada on, it's a video Julian did a while ago, it just really resonated. And so I was like, this is just a cool guy that I'd want to like have coffee with and meet anyway. And we got into it and then started to learn and realize like just the stuff that I think you all are more privy to. This is literally like my second foray into like design fiction, like near future laboratories, like Discord. Like I literally had zero concept of what this was at all until Julie and I connected last Tuesday. And so just the layers of like intersection of like futurism, consciousness, cinema studies, kind of thinking, outside of the box, learning about everybody who's involved with all of this was just really inspiring in a way that, it kind of feels like a preemptive midlife pivot, but with a lot more like kind of just meat on the bone, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to be hand wavy, but I think that sort of is an inspiring, thing to start your Friday off with.
Cool. Well, I'm only like 6 weeks in, so you're not too new. It's
Wait, I just missed the thing to start off your Fridays with. What is it?
Just space to do what we're doing right now, I think.
Oh, there's Camille. I was wondering. I was like, I heard the voice, but I didn't see the the square.
Well, it's so cold here. I have to do this like blanket arrangement before I sit down at a desk for any extended period.
Did you get hail over to you? You must have, because you're kind of closer
Yeah,
to the hills.
there's hail, there's snow on the mountain. I have it all, except for a working space heater.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nuts. It's really strange. Hey, Benjamin. Or Tricks, you're almost like in a perfect Cornell box if that one doorway wasn't there.
Camille, pro tip: if you get yourself like a little heated blanket, like I've got one on the back of this chair here that I have bulldog clipped to it, and that's what we do in Canada. So yeah, you hit the button on, keep your core warm. You don't need the blanket, everything. You don't need the heater, and it's cheaper than the space heater.
That is
Thanks
such
for
a
that pro
brilliant
tip,
idea.
Gray.
That is so brilliant. I plugged mine in last night. I was like, it's time. But
Yeah.
wrapping over the chair that's next level.
Yeah. Just drape it on the
That
chair.
is a good idea.
A couple of bulldog clips, turn it on. You're good. $15 well spent.
Are these? I always, because maybe I grew up in an era where like where people were being killed by their electric blankets. They're all good now, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean it's just a giant resistor, but
I know, which doesn't seem right somehow.
it kind of doesn't seem right. But mine has actually, I'm gonna turn mine on. Mine times out. Mine times out after 30, 60, or 90 minutes. So I just set it on like level 2, 90 minutes.
Okay.
By the time we're done this call, the blanket will be back to a safe state.
Yeah, to low energy flow. That's actually maybe I'll get it. Maybe I'll get an electric because it gets cold back here. I've got a heater, a space heater, and Chewy the dog is like kind of he's in his little dog bed right next to it.
Yeah.
But it's got to be under the desk proper, so that it traps the heat into this ball of heat like right by my knees. If I move it out, then there's no real substantial effect because this being like an original California garage, there's nothing insulation about this situation.
USB provides a pretty safe amount of current for like a short length of microwire. I built like a back of hand mousing kind of thing that plugged in with my USB mouse. So that it would keep it warm when I was in New Zealand. That
That's
was
great.
pretty rewarding. So yeah,
I've heard
any
good
stuff you
things
have for
about
live work,
compression gloves. Compression gloves. But sorry, speaking of electric blankets, one of my favorite objects that I normally display, but I don't have my display wall up yet. I have this great like handle from Electric Blanket. It's just really nice in the way that, you know, the button moves to turn a dial. So this is one of my favorite kind of IRL artifacts.
That's great.
I
And
think-
what's
I think it'd be
what's
really-
the circuit in there? Oh, go ahead, Benjamin.
Oh no, something I think would be like a really interesting, like post-apocalyptic solar punk project is recycled arcade games, where like you make Arduino video games out of just the components that we all have in our trash bins of like, yeah, I bought this Raspberry Pi 5 years ago. I have an Arduino Uno that I'm never using. And can we turn this into a video game system?
Like Adafruit is almost there, like because you can buy the little laser cut whatever mini video game systems that you put or not a system, laser cut console that you can put a Raspberry Pi into and make a little micro arcade. Just make it
I'm
a
just
trash,
thinking like
like
that, like
old
that
yogurt tin.
knob on that switch is like it's a really nice like feel. Like lots of things have nice interfaces that we just computers are all just like button, mouse, keyboard, touchpad now. But
Have
like
you
kind of lost this like cornucopia of different input devices and different ways of switches.
love it? Okay, have you ever played? Oh yeah, look at that! It's all like through hole, like little stuff.
Oh,
Wait,
Jesus.
It's pretty
Oh
old
my
school.
God.
It's pretty old
Oh,
school.
no.
You know,
Oh,
they don't make
no.
handles like this anymore.
Oh,
That's why
no.
I keep it.
Love it.
It's like that mechanical thing where like it twists and you feel that like click, click, click.
Yeah.
You absolutely feel the click, click, click. Again, you know, that's one of the reasons I keep it as one of my, you know, why aren't more artifacts like this?
Have you ever played a fully analog arcade game?
Like pinball?
Not even not even pinball, but like
Pool?
even
What do you-
like no, okay, so like a pinball would be like an arcade game that
Mechanical.
feels more digital. Yeah, mechanical. Yeah, like a
Yeah,
fully
yeah.
mechanical.
Yeah. Have you been to the Musée Mécanique in San Francisco?
No.
Oh man, it's the
Great.
coolest.
Add it to your tour. I'll
Yeah,
meet you
Yeah,
there.
totally,
I'll meet you
totally.
there.
It's up by like Fisherman's Wharf. And it has like antiquated coin op, like mechanical game stuff, like hockey ones, for instance, where you just have like rollers, like think about like foosball, but like for hockey as this is a terrible game.
Well, one that I saw was there was a place in Toronto called Tilt, and it's basically just a video game bar. So you go have a few drinks somewhere, and then you show up to the video game bar. But they have this section, or they had this section of mechanical video games that weren't like foosball or pinball, but they were almost like an asteroids or a platformer where you had to mechanically maneuver a character and avoid obstacles, but it was all mechanical. It was yeah, I'm familiar with pachinko. I played that in Japan.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just of the genre of like purely mechanical
Yeah.
arcade game.
So that's what your prompt of like the solar punk video games of the future, like that'd be really interesting, like a video game made entirely out of like sticks and twigs and rocks and
Cool.
nothing electronic would be a really interesting way of but something super sophisticated.
I saw a thing of I forget where, but basically someone brought up like imagination and imagining the future and kids' toys. And one of the examples they posed was kids in refugee camps in, I think it was one of the DRC neighboring countries, I think Uganda. But kids had clay Nokia brick phones, like feature phones. And
Yeah.
it's like a way to imagine like I have a phone as like this is technology.
I remember that stuff. When I was at Nokia, it was it might have been in and around a lot of work that like Jan Chipchase was doing, like going to these places and like checking out. Yeah.
Yeah.
How the vibe of this kind of form of communication was effervescing in these weird artifacts.
Yeah, I mean, I remember even as a kid, like my brother and I used to love using my dad's like 90s Motorola like dead phones as like it's a fun toy.
This is bringing me back
Right.
to being in elementary school. Do you guys remember Capri Suns?
Yes.
I had a buddy that would take an empty Capri Sun. He was really kind of to the point of imaginative, and when that stops, it was probably around 5th or 6th grade, Julian, to your point earlier in that presentation, he would take an empty Capri Sun and fold it in half and then fold the bottom so it was kind of a flip, and he used the straw as the antenna. And I thought that was such a cool, weird way to just kind of like posture, and then the weird just evolution of how we arrived at now it's just a part of our everyday being was just come a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I'm thinking I did a really, really stupid thing when I was in the 3rd grade. It started with discovering that if you take every flavor of Play-Doh and you mix them up, it just turns gray. It just becomes this gray thing. And it reminded me of like plastique, like that dynamite you see on like the A-Team.
Yeah, totally.
And I formed like a brick of plastic out of this newly discovered Play-Doh. And then I did like what Camille did. I took apart one of my dad's like random things and I stuck wires into it. And I took my tiny little bedroom alarm clock and I put the wires and everything around the alarm clock and I stuck it under my teacher's desk in the 3rd grade.
Oh no. Oh no. Did you get scolded?
No, this is what happened. So the thing is, the alarm clock made a ticking sound. So I was really hoping she'd hear the tick, 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 and then look underneath and then see this intricate wire plugged in gray blob of plasticine that looked like a bomb. And I put this in the morning, and then by lunchtime, I just had the realization, like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
I just had visions
something,
of like,
something called, something just
yeah.
deep down just kind of said, hey man, I don't know.
So meanwhile, it's just ticking under my teacher's desk for like a few hours. And I think it was after lunch when I decided to like get back early, sneak into the classroom, go under the teacher's desk, take it back without getting busted. So that's
no.
Yeah, but there's another like timeline where the cops got called and the fire department showed up.
Totally.
And like
they're like, yeah, sorry, you're Mr. and Mrs. LeBray, your child is disturbed and we're gonna send them to this place.
Yeah, I went to the loony bin and Harambe never died.
Yeah.
And that was a whole other timeline.
Yeah.
Okay, so my pre-9/11 story. That's like post 9/11, that would have been the most like, oh my God.
It's like what some people did. I remember some art students did a thing because they thought they were being cool doing an intervention, and it was like, that was not cool. You were not thinking that through. And you're actually a grown adult. Like at least Dre was like 7 years old or something like that. Yeah. But you're like college kids trying to be like, oh, we're gonna make fun of all this security theater. It was like, no bueno. It's not cool.
About 10 or more years ago, maybe 12 years ago, there was an ad agency in Toronto that decided to do like an alternate reality game geocaching thing. So one of the caches was a Pelican case that they chained to a pole at a streetcar stop. And that shut down almost the entirety of that part of Toronto for a full day because it was like post 9/11 paranoia going on, and it turned out to be like a alternate reality game for like Doritos or some stupid shit.
Whatever happened to alternate reality games? Like, why were they not as successful, I guess, as they could have been?
What are you talking about? It's called QAnon.
Yeah.
That's where it went.
Was Second Life?
They
one of
they
these too?
win. They win for like the ARG Award of the Year. Am I right?
I
That's-
love
Right.
I
that.
think that's pretty accurate. I do think that's pretty accurate, but that's not, like
I get it. You mean like the one
What-
where people are
what's
like, okay, we're playing a game now, and now we're not.
yeah,
just went
yeah,
so
like
deep,
what's
it's
kind of the commercial viability, right? In terms of like, oh, like call this phone number and like you're gonna get faxed this page.
Yeah, it was never about the money. It was about power and influence always. Even for the kids who were doing it as like a little, as a project. Power and
So-
influence. Hey, can
I'm not
oh,
sure
sorry, go on.
from an advertising perspective. Like, Dre, you may know more about it. I don't think alternate reality games were ever successful. I think that there were a story that a couple of ad agencies came up with that they thought was cool because a few people thought that it was an interesting idea, but I don't actually think anybody liked them or played them beyond being like, oh, this is interesting, sort of 5 minutes in, understand the lore, and then sort of duck back out of it. A lot of advertising agencies work kind of more on the story of their advertising than on the reality of it. And they put more budget, and this is kind of understandable, that they put more budget into preparing the case study, the description of why their advertising was cool and edgy and successful, than in making it any of those things. And a lot of people who are really interesting to work for but less successful in advertising don't understand that, and so you get to do cool work, but they fail to pay the big bucks because they don't realize that advertising advertises advertising to advertisers. So that's what my understanding of what happened to ARG. I may be wrong. Anybody else who knows more, I'd love to hear about it.
I have a few thoughts around ARG. So I produced 2.5 ARGs in 2022. And so I love ARGs, and I've got a friend that has a company that does specifically, that's all they do is just ARGs. And I got to spend some time with Brock Enright. I don't know if you know this guy, but he does an ARG where you can hire him to kidnap you. And they'll do like a clause with lawyers, broken bones clause, like injury clause. And people have been full on kidnapped, thrown into trunks, buried in a hole in the desert, like really, really dangerous shit. And it was Video Game Adventure Services was the name of that. And I think it was video games spelt backward.com. But Brock Enright is a crazy, crazy artist. And I had tons of fun with him. And he like mind fucked me at a conference once, and it was super, super fun. But yeah, the ARG thing is there's so many different levels to it, right? Like Pokemon Go technically is an ARG.
Mhm.
There was a predecessor called Parallel Kingdom, which was applying a gaming layer onto Google Maps, and you could claim your spot in that world. But there's in the movie business, they call it transmedia storytelling, movies and television.
Mhm.
It's really, really niche. There are people who love doing it, but I produced a couple of ARGs for NFT launches last year that I worked on, and they were based in Discord. And the idea was that we would post a somewhat cryptic message, and there was some kind of unexplained item to the message, and people figured it out. People figured it out really fast. So the second one I had to be infinitely more complex. But what it did is it created this other story where people would have to go to a website, and it was a fake business, and there was a phone number. And if you called that phone number, you would get a voice message, and the voice message would tell you to do something else. And then I even went as far as encoding audio files with a spectral encoder. So the idea is you had to actually download an audio file and a specific iPhone app and record it on your phone and look at the spectral wave, and it would spell out a word, which was the next clue to the ARG. So I love this type of stuff, and it's not to say that it's still going strong, but it's still happening. But it's very, very it's very limited. But some of the better ones to look into is like what Heroes, that TV show about the superhero people discovering their superpowers from, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. Heroes did an alternate reality thing, which was really, really fun. And the Sarah Connor Chronicles did a really incredible alternate reality thing where they buried cameras all over the United States, and you would have to uncover the camera and submit the images that were taken, or take a picture with it and send it to a server, and it would send you a photo of what you took a picture of from the future, like 35 years in the future, a Terminator future. And they had a gang of Photoshop artists that would just process these photos during the campaign and send them back to you. Anyways, I love ARGs. If you know of any that you like, or that's going on, let me know. I'm always into goofing around with it. But yeah, it's super nerdy. It's up there with
I
LARPing.
feel like Meow Wolf kind of dabbles in an overlap there. It's not quite an ARG, but they've got elements there of
That's a good one.
go into their space.
Immersive, kind of like taking you to another place kind of thing.
Yeah. And one other angle of the ARG is like the escape house kind of evolution of similar ideas, right? Although similar to Meow Wolf, kind of contained within a space.
Hey, can we get into projects a little bit? Because I got some stuff that I got to get off my chest.
Let's do it.
It's making me nuts in a great way. It'd be great to just kind of rap about it and get some feedback. So, hey, Jed, are you there? Jed,
Yeah.
calling Jed Burke to the dais.
Yes.
To the
Yes.
dais. There he is. Okay. So this one's driving me. There are a couple reasons why it's driving me nuts in a good way, and I'm gonna tell a little bit of a story to get you there, rather than just plopping you in. And the other thing is I'm feeling a little bit of urgency around this particular story I'm gonna tell you, because I've got all the tooling for a couple of for 2 books it's like in process. So it's like I'm trying to very quickly see if I can get another book into that process, because then save on like less than I'm a logistics guy, LTL, less than load container shipments. And so we can save a little bit on that rather than doing multiple things stacked up and get stuck in the Suez Canal. So Jed, who some of you know, we've known each other for a good deal of time, and back in the day, his professor at Art Center reached out to me because he's like, I got this student, I don't know what to do with him. And it turned out to be, he's gone beyond me. I don't know what to do with this guy. And so Jed and I kind of hung out and collaborated, did a bunch of projects together, that in a beautiful way. Like we kind of toured around the world, like we were on planes together going to weird places. And so that was pretty awesome. And then so that's our kind of background. Probably 8 or 9 years we've known each other. And recently,
more like 15 or 17.
Oh, is it really that long?
I think.
Yeah, I guess it would be. Yeah, it would be, because
2004.
it was like shortly after I moved to LA, which was like 2005. We've been
Yeah.
around 2005, 2006. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Jed's been doing a bunch of stuff in the kind of in the crypto space, some blockchainy kinds of things, and we've been talking a lot about that. And he's got a project that he doesn't seem to be able to finish in the crypto space, which is fine. It's classic Jed, which is beautiful. And so at some point randomly, like a few weeks ago, I said, "Hey Jed, have you been playing around with Midjourney?" And it was for no other reason than I was just kind of, I was just curious, because Jed's like, you're like super into you're in Discord and stuff, pretty, and you get that space. And so I was just kind of nudging him, and then I think you said, in my mind, you said something like, well, what should I start with? And I kind of gave you Mad Lib style the prompts that I had been using for all my Auto Trader vehicle stuff. And I feel like you took that and just kind of tweaked it, and then like a day later you came back and like, look, this is what this fucking thing spat out. And one of Jed's muses, I guess, is hooved animals, right? sheep.
They're herding.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
herding animals.
yeah, herding animals. He'll tell you everything you need to know about a belted Galloway if you ask him. um, and so he showed me these sheep, and I think Dre too. We had a little
Mhm.
channel, and I was like, fucking hell, man, that's a thing. Like I'm digging these sheep, and they look like, and I think I wrote a little kind of description of one, like a Raytheon Mark 7. You know, it's been 6 seasons, does well in bad weather, sometimes gets lost, but always finds its way back, and it just felt like a thing. And so we were walking and talking, thinking like, oh, is it going to be like, is this like one of those sheets that you might get if you go to like an animal auction? You know, you pay your $5 to go in, and it's like, here are the animals that are up for auction today. We've got a bunch of herding creatures, and we've got some digesters and some, you know, I don't know, this kind of thing, whatever it is. And so we were talking about that, and then Jed shared these pictures that his Midjourney collabs with his stepdad, who's like a big PK Dick fan. Is the way I've been telling the story, and the way I tell it, it's like came back. It's like, Jed, you know, there was this guy who wrote this book about electric sheep, and Jed just shared back to me, like, you know, kind of this, and with a picture of one of the like kind of early covers, Ballantine mass market edition, 75 cents kind of thing. And I was like, fucking hell, man, we got something here. This is definitely something. And I sat down for a couple hours and just tweaked a cover and changed it to it was a beautiful 1970s kind of era. I mean, I'm just interpreting from the fonts. Felt like 1970s mass market paperback that some cover designer at Signet Books was like, oh, cool, this will be fun. Like, I'll do a cover for this. And it just says, do androids dream of electric sheep? Philip K. Dick, science fiction, 75 cents, that kind of thing. And I just tweaked it to androids dream of electric sheep. Like a complete analysis of the android psyche. Jed Burke, MD, PhD. And I was just like, man, I want that book. I don't know what's in it. Matter of fact, I talked to my guy, Ken, the printer guy, and I said, like, I know it sounds like wasteful, but would you be okay just printing 126 blank pages with this cover? And Ken, of course, is like, I'll do whatever the fuck you want. You pay me, so it's fine with you do this. It's not a big deal. And then I was just like playing around, and then like the next day was like a Friday, and I was just hanging out back here, and I just said, like, I wonder what ChatGPT would make of this novel. So I had the text for the Do Androids Dream of the Electric Sheep, and I just started slamming in like passages and asking ChatGPT, could you sort of, could you write a summary of this from the perspective of, American literary studies? Could you describe to me the motivation of this Rick Deckard character and his relationship to Rachel? And it was just spitting back this stuff, and I was like, I don't know, I kind of like this. I'm not saying that it was like, I'm not turning this in as a paper, but like the fact that there's so many layers of like artificial intelligence going on here that it kind of felt like a thing. Now, Jed and I were talking about doing the sheep as trading cards, because I've kind of figured out the tooling to do packs of trading cards, like the foil wrapped, Garbage Pail Kids or whatever. And so that was a thing. And I sort of saw these things together. Like there's this book that is like it's just like it doesn't make any sense, but it does make sense, because it's like now you're reading a summary of this section of the book, and now you're reading the dialogue as if it were written as a legal brief, and now you're reading the dialogue as if it were a shot by shot setup for a film scene, and just all this collected things, so you can read the book in this form and just kind of get this other perspective. The other thing I was thinking about was like just a book containing the sheep, because Jed's doing 64 sheep, right?
Yeah, that's what we it's kind of to figure out a good set of 64, I guess, was where we,
yeah,
that was the point of
yeah.
worked out. Could
But
be more or less, but yes,
yeah,
basically my thinking has been to refine a set of 64.
yeah. So anyway, that's where things are at. My inclination is like, okay, let's do the trading cards. So I think it was going to be like a few or 4,000 packs, was it?
I think that was, depending on how many were in there, right? With the minimum amounts
Yeah.
that you do.
So the tooling is basically like you can say like I want foil packs of 5, each pack unique, and
Right.
you know they'll do it for you. You just get them the art, and
Yeah.
so part of me feels like they're connected in this loose way, but definitely want to do that fucking book. The other thing is like we're kind of as a collective, I'm going to apply for the LA Art Book Fair to
Mhm.
have a sad folding table there or something.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if we'll get in, but my suspicion is like if I'm able to, you have to apply and you sort of show them. This is Patrick was encouraging me to do this. So I'm doing a 10th anniversary edition of TBD catalog. We'll have the manual of design fiction should be ready by then. The second printing, it'd have like this Android's Dream of Electric Sheep kind of psychology book.
Mhm.
And whatever else we manage to get done, like whether it's Green Pages, ABC Solar Punk. I mean, I think this shit would kill. We'd have the best fucking table there amongst other
Well-
stuff where people are selling like I don't, it's fine. I'm trying to build myself up. Like, they got
When,
this
when do you need a final draft by to make that deadline?
to make for the application.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry.
like in March, but I don't think you need a final draft. I think I think they have space to, upload a few photos of the thing. And so, to be honest with you, and because I think it's totally fine. I'm totally fine with it. I don't think it's like I've perfected my 3D rendering skills, so I can definitely render whatever we want, and it'll look like it's sitting on my cutting mat, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't think we're trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, especially because it's like you pay them to have the folding table, the sad folding table, and the sad folding chairs. Ours wouldn't be sad. Ours would be fucking rocking. Because it would just be like, who wouldn't have a copy of Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, a complete analysis of the Nexus 6 psyche? Like, who wouldn't have that? Especially if it was written by ChatGPT. Plus, I can get the trading cards of the Electric Sheep. I guess yes, I should have that as well.
Mhm.
ABC Solar Punk. The fuck you? Who are you guys? Yeah, I can totally see it.
Yeah.
Are you guys from Ohio where that train crashed?
That's right. That's right. Is this an ARG? The hell?
Mhm.
Where's the trap door? Let me out.
Yeah.
You feeling that?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking you showed me the cover a few days back, and not the whole thing, just part of it. And then then you showed me the whole thing, and then I was like, okay. And I was thinking about how this how it can complement maybe where we started with the trading card thing, and then kind of got me going on like I bought one of those little it's like a little book like a while back when Dash was a bit younger, we would go to flea markets and like pick up like Matchbox cars, and I bought one of those little books that sort of gives you all the insight into the rarity of them, sort of, and like what they how to collect or how to get them, and that's kind of where my head went first, and like how could this sort of fit in and complement cards versus a catalog or a book. It's obviously a little different than where you're coming from, but that was my first sort of jump to like maybe how it loosely connects. It's some other, it's another level of the I guess backstory in a sense to where these things are. So anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I also in addition to, I like the idea of I guess of there being like a companion
Mhm.
to the trading cards that could almost be like, I'm not sure what form it takes, what the archetype is, but sort of like what you're saying, Brandel, like that there is, I mean, I guess, so the trading cards, just to be more complete, the idea is that they'd have Jed's, him and his Midjourney studio assistants renderings, and then on the back, there would be the kind of description, like like you'd see in a sports trading card or whatever, that would have that text that's like, this is a Northrop, Model 7 with 6 seasons on it, has a
Yeah.
has a gimpy left hind haunch.
Yeah. Yeah. In some ways, the cards represent, or the text that, if we think to the one that you did there as an example, kind of represents that someone owned this or had it, or, you know, it's used in a sense, but maybe the images in the book are referring to, you know, them as a breed or a species, or, you know, whatever it might be. It's kind of more about the, not maybe not so specific to that particular one.
Yeah.
If
So
that makes sense.
this is what I'm wondering, because I'm just thinking. Then this is like, you know, just a little bit of the urgency that I'm feeling because of this, the production
Mhm.
timelines and stuff. Is the, just curious folks' thoughts of like, is the book so like right now I mean I'm literally thinking like maybe I'll just add to my task list this weekend to flow the cybernetic text into, you know, into InDesign, basically just kind of produce the book. Or do you think, and also plus or no or whatever, the imagery, like does some of the imagery also go in the book, and is that imagery, is it precisely the electric sheep that Jed of the 64, or is it some of the alternates? And if there's images of sheep, does it also contain the this is just, it's a super vague question. I don't think there's any specific answer, but like,
Yeah.
you know, my mind is kind of like, it's fragmented to wonder if like there's something about the book just being this text, right? And then there's also, originally I was thinking like the book could have this title, you know, the cover, this funny cover, you know, this looks familiar, but wait, something's wrong, kind of thing. And then I was thinking like, you know, if you have 64 sheep, that's 64 spreads, so it's like 128 pages. Like that kind of makes up a paperback book, sort of. You know, it's close enough. And so I was thinking like, oh, it could just be like facing spreads. Here's the sheep, and here's the text, or, you know, maybe the other way around, or the, you know, the copy. But then that felt like, well, what are the trading cards for?
Mhm. Rather than
Julie, my dad has this book that is a pocket little slip thing you'd have on the train, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Really nice antique. He collects these things of various kinds. And it's got plates on one facing page with just the most gorgeous black and white engravings of chickens, all kinds of chickens. And then on the facing
That sounds like
page,
something Jed would have. Totally. I see him smiling. He's like, oh,
and on the
man.
facing page is an elaborate description of the coloration
Oh,
because they
man.
didn't have color.
Oh, man.
And so you can read just, it's exactly almost what you're talking about. You just go to
Yeah.
sheep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talking about it
And
reminded me of this The Great Pretender by Theo Janssen, you know, the strand-based guy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really cool about it is that he, as a central conceit, is he's like, the pictures have nothing to do with the text, and I'm just going to write stuff about it. But then he has sort of categorizations and description of the specific strand beasts, and so there's kind of a short bio of each of these little enormous animals. And but yeah, like I think what you were saying about the shot by shot breakdown, like just being able to throw things that are in this world, in this universe together without even attempting to stick it together would be really awesome, Julian.
What if it's a catalog, though, of possible electric sheep dreams that I, as an AI, might want to, you know, download and try? Like it's like a purposeful object. Like the point of the thing in this case was to sell chickens. So, you know, maybe it's not just a catalog of the dreams of androids, but you know, a catalog in the sense of an infographic, but a catalog in the sense of a sales tool.
Well, what about like chickens? Chickens have survived for a long time, right? Like they've, as a form factor, they've made it through many different types of ecosystems. So, you know, what if it's the chicken as a change agent, right? Like how does this particular chicken somehow, like, you know, reseed the world in some way? So it becomes a way of like imagining possible futures. This one, aerated the soil in such a way that a certain, plant was able to grow, or it proliferated so much that it, became a food source for other species.
That's what dreams are to the androids, though. That's sort of what I'm saying. Like, what purpose do dreams have, and why would you have a catalog of dreams?
Well, what are Android dream tropes, right? Like you see those dream analysis cheat sheets where it's like, if you dream that you're in an elevator, it means something. If you dream that your teeth are falling out, you're going to get money, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe just come up with a whole bunch of sheep dream tropes.
Well, this is getting deep
them with illustrations.
This is getting deep to the question I have with AI, which is, what is the sort of structure of latent vector space, or what would the dreams be that are derived by, processing all of human art that no human would see, but if you ate it all up, then you would have these, like, what's the woman's name, Loab or whatever, the strange woman who keeps showing up in one of the algorithms.
Oh yeah, like Krungus as well.
Yeah, and so those to me are like nexuses in the space of all the data that's been combed, and then you get these clumps. So they're sort of exactly what you're saying, Dre.
Is it too literal to like train a neural network to produce sheep and then print out all of the weights of the neural network? Like, that's the content of the book. It's just like the weights of every network that was in the thing. Because I think you'd probably end up filling like a book, and it would be like, yeah, this was a network this deep. These were all the weights for all the vectors. And if you plug all this into like the following and you generate it, it will come up with like a picture of a sheep.
That reminds me of in the early days of home computing, you would get these books of video games, and it would be the source code that you would type out in BASIC.
Yeah, or the magazine would have it.
You could encode the Midjourney run as a barcode, so that you could drop into the material correctly. That's interesting, because it is all open source, right? The way that prompt engineers seem to protect their property is really interesting. Their concept of art is just as withheld, scarce as painters.
I have to admit, I feel that. I totally feel that. There's something that feels like you're trying to hold on to, in some sense, like the uniqueness attribute that I think is a natural aspect, or it comes from somewhere. I'm not saying it's natural, but it comes from somewhere. Like the creative. I was just talking to my niece and a bunch of their friends are staying over, and so we were talking about this last night. Like, where does that come from? One of them's a professor, and it's like, and was talking. It's like, hey, I'm any ideas about how to deal with ChatGPT with my students? And so we're just kind of having this musing on that, and they are of the mind that I'm not gonna, a very, very, very open thinking about it. It's like, I'm not gonna tell them not to use it. I am gonna work with them to understand why they want to use it and how they can use it as a way of kind of evolving and developing and kind of having a repository for their own ideas. So don't give me the thing that ChatGPT spits out. Like, that's that's wrong. Build. Can you build on it? Can you start with the raw text, as if you were starting with the raw text from a primary source, and now make it yours? Like, go through the iterative process of making it yours, not just by continuing to prompt it, but like helping it unpack. And I thought that was like, especially enlightening, particularly at this moment that we're at, where everyone's kind of running around. Speaking of chickens, like chickens with their heads chopped off, like, what are we gonna do about this? This is crazy. It's like, all right, this is the calculator when I was in high school.
And so it reminds me of like the work of Sol LeWitt, right? Where his philosophy was, my art is the instructions on how to make the art. And so he would give museums a list of instructions that their job is to go figure out how to build this. He's building the Lego instruction manual, and it's someone else's job to figure out how to make it. I wonder if, it would be interesting to see people just publishing their prompts, right? Skip the whole process of actually putting it into Midjourney, right? I leave that to whoever wants to dabble with it, but just publish the prompt itself.
Yeah,
Is
and
it
it's
really
not
great?
deterministic, right? I mean, you could type the same prompt in and some other shit comes out.
You
Yeah,
include
I
the
think
seed
it's really
value
good.
now.
Sorry?
If you include seed values, you can harden the RNG aspect.
Where did the seed value, how do you extract those?
Well, in Midjourney, you just push a seed flag in there and specify the seed specifically.
Okay, and then you just kind of keep that. I didn't know that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And it'll always output the same image.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like the high art in developing a character with a specific seed and then merging that with, like, if you want to do a supermodel. I've been following this girl who is just doing amazing model development, and she can engineer, the redhead with the blue eyes and the smile and the certain kind of hair, and then she can dress her up and put her in different scenes and keep that character looking the same. And
That's
she does
crazy.
it by creating a seed, training that, and then retraining, copying the run and putting the seed back in a different way. It's just super intricate, but she reinforces enough of the, and then when you append it to the other parts of the prompt, the other variations you want around it, she has some way of multi-weighting the seeds, and you actually can do things like say a woman with in your first part, and you train up the woman how you want her, and then in your second prompt you say a woman on a beach, and it takes the other woman laying around and puts her on in, so you can sort of cross parts of
it's like kit bashing but with prompts.
It's multi-prompting art is slowly being teased out, I think, because I think the special effect of watching where you have the same material and you zoom in on the person and everything on the table is morphing and changing and dancing around, but it's staying a table, and her necklace is going like, it's such a weird new effect. We're definitely going to see a lot of that. There's just no question the producers will love that shit. And it's pretty easy to make. But
could you share that? Is that particular user's
let me
thing,
see if
whatever?
her name is Victoria Blank. And she's on the Midjourney on, I'll find some of her stuff.
Cool. Okay, so that's the thing. Thanks to you guys for any other thoughts on that. I think we're just gonna have to find a way to move forward, especially if we want to make some deadlines for doing stuff.
Well, why don't you just use the same sheep as the seed image for each one, as a means to do quick variations?
I'm not sure the sheep's because Jed's pretty much done with the sheep. I think it's now it's like I was trying to figure out how to integrate that with the. I'm assuming you are the 64 that you have on that Figma are pretty.
Yeah, that was like maybe 48. There's some more though.
Okay, yeah. What we're not going to do, Jed, is we're not going to drag this out over the course of like 3 years. This shit's going to get done.
Yeah, I would say I was asking earlier, I like a lot of the variations, and why not whatever the book is has a slight variation than what it's not the same images that are the cards, and leave it at that. They can be very similar. I think I put one example in our Discord chat of just like two yellowy sheep that kind of look the same. But anyways, that's my last thought. They could be very much looking the same, but not exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure about that. I feel like the diversity that you had in that grid for the trading card sheep, is that what you're talking about?
Well, I was just saying that let's just say you started that chat in the Discord, right? Like the let's see here, where it says androids, like right there, there's just two yellow ones as a
Yeah.
reference point, right? So this was, one of the 64, let's say, but then there's two variations of that one. And my thought was just, maybe the published book aspect is one of these, and the other one would be
Oh, I see what you're saying.
in the
Yeah.
card. So they wouldn't be exactly the same image, was my thought. But
Yeah.
I mean, that was,
It's a little bit subtle. I think, for like, because people are just, they're like, what the heck's going on here? And I think there was something about like the diversity that you had in that grid that I think super works for the trading cards. And then
Yep.
the only thought that I would have is like, maybe there's a section in the center of the book
Mhm.
of, I like the old timey phrase, random, thanks for bringing up, like the color plates, like it's like there was an extensive procedure to get these into the book, which isn't normally, so it adds value, like in the center, that's maybe just a selection of them, like not the entirety, but
Right.
something that kind of feels into like, oh, okay, so it makes the book and the trading cards feel as somewhat, like they're related, it's like somewhat of a family. And maybe even if they're like some outtake sheep that won't appear in the trading cards, it's anticipating that there's gonna be another drop of trading cards or something along those lines. The thing that I felt without in, it was just, it's purely instinct, and I'm happy to be convinced that my instincts are off, is that if you just repeat the sheep that are the trading cards in the book, somehow it didn't feel as, it didn't anticipate like a bigger world.
I kind of like the idea of not showing the sheep in the book, because
Mhm.
that means there's a reason to get the cards. But I do like the knobs and the levers and the greeble that's all over the sheep. And it'd be really fun to maybe inside the book, it's maybe focusing on that, kind of like that Star Trek technical manual, right? Focus on the knob. This is what this lever does. You've already written a description of how it works in all kinds of weather, but always comes home. Maybe we write the technical specification of the come homeifier on the sheep, and it's just a zoom in, so we don't show the sheep, but we show a specific detail that's on it and go into some elaborate technical or interesting detail.
Have you thought about doing a poster? Like maybe you've got the book cover as like I got these from like a little print shop, like a folded piece of paper, and it's like a tiny little exhibition. It was like there were three of them, and it's like a what is this print shop type deal, and it unfolds, and each one has a poster on the unfold. So it's like there's all the content that you read as a book on one side once it's folded, and poster on the other. This one's different. They're all kind of different, but like these it could be like a tiny book that drops into the trading card thing. You pull it out and it's like you've got some kind of description of the thing, and then it's you could have the cover of the book really big here, right? And it's actually like a precursor to the book that's coming out in some way. Might not get your LTL shipment covered because these wouldn't be very big by the time you're all sorted.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I actually, I'm starting to feel it's like we might not be LTL, because it's like 4,000 copies of one book. It's like, and you start adding it up, it's like, whoa.
How-
You could drop these anywhere. You could just go and like go to any copy.
These
shop
could,
and,
just do those completely separate. Yeah.
And they could lead back to the trading cards, but they could be pretty information dense.
Yeah. Okay. All good thoughts.
Jed, looking at those two very similar ones, kind of reminds me of the way that there are families of very closely related units in a real-time strategy game, and they're in a context like that, they're visually very similar with minor differences, and the story that you tell about them and the sort of the similarities and the differences are sort of narratively and interactively in terms of what they do. So that's a way of drawing visually similar things apart, or being able to tell a different sort of more elaborate story with them, is to to be able to play with what other sort of accompanying or attendant information you have there. So if you have a thing that you do with writing in a way that, you know, that Julian put together a little bit of a blurb about a couple of the sheep, then that's something that you can do there, is by playing with that visual similarity, you have another place or function that you use to separate them.
Do you need a wiring diagram for electric sheep? Like schematic. Couldn't you have like a sheep technical guide, like for troubleshooting your electric sheep? Repair manuals, right to repair.
I mean, your just that first description definitely indicates that you've tuned this one up, fixed it up a bit, added some features, you know.
Yeah, there's something that I think you could, you know, so balancing, you know, that beautiful, you know, I would love to have that, and then
Yeah.
you know, just the practice, we're like in production, but I think you can apply those things, because I still got to write these descriptions for 64 sheep. So you could say, like, you know, refer to like Haynes manual, you know, 27.3/12 for or comes with a manual, you know, so it just comes with like a, you know, a service manual.
Yeah, and just
it-
world building.
Yeah, comes with a service manual to the 64 model, but it's compatible with this 128 that I'm selling.
Sounds like
so I
another
think
book.
yeah, so it's exactly what you're saying. You effervesce those things without necessarily having to do them, but then you allow people to kind of let their mind just kind of like explode. Like, when are you guys going to come out with that manual? I need to see that. And it's like, okay, that's the next thing that we'll work on. You know, based on the Nexus 3. So, you know, it's a little bit of a dullard. Occasionally has trouble getting upstairs.
When you were talking about the photography in the book versus in the cards, my brain went to a first person view with the flock out in the fields and what it's like for the life of the shepherd, or a
Yeah.
day in the life of the sheep, or some other kind of documentary photo story
Totally.
about
Yeah.
the, you know, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I tried not very hard, literally tried for like maybe, you know, 10 minutes to see if I could get something that felt into that, and I think it could. I mean, if anyone's you know, wants to try, but you know, I just tried very you know, naively and innocently, and nothing came out. But then Jed brought up, it's like, what about like farm equipment? I was like, okay, I can do that for days. But if anyone has the chops or time or interest in doing like,
So what do you
what's the
specifically
vista
want?
look like, you know, with a bunch of electric sheep in the field and the Grand Tetons in the background, or like an urban scene where, you know, someone is herding their sheep in a,
Looks
know,
like a
in a-
golf course, because like the glacial highlands, you know, shortly cropped grass. Why would you have electric sheep in a city, but if not to keep the golf course manicured?
they do really good at digesting garbage, you know, these
Yeah,
particular ones.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Like
Good.
a sheep with a fan in the side of it, you know, and it just
Yeah, like hoovers things up.
Don't electric sheep imply electric sheepdogs?
Yeah, of course, of course.
that's the maintenance machine.
Training your electric sheepdog.
Electric horses. Yeah. All right, this is good stuff. I mean, I think it's all good. It's also, I mean, you guys get it. It's like, I told my guy Ken that I would have a bunch of PDFs for him on the 28th of February. Or at the end of February, and I was like, fucking short month. God damn it.
28th. Okay,
Yeah.
it's pretty soon.
Well, so that's the deadline for all the book production, because that stuff takes forever. But the trading cards, I think, will move a lot quicker, is according to our guy in Pennsylvania.
Right. Yeah, and we kind of set a timeline of middle of March for that, as I remember last time.
If you say so, it sounds right.
I don't know. I think that's what you wrote. And
Yeah, I think because I was concerned that you were gonna kind of just metabolize this for like months and months and months.
Well, I'm pretty. I mean, yeah, no, I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get as much time this last week to do what I wanted to do, but I'm not that far off.
Yeah, I think you're pretty damn close.
I don't know if this is like a wild tangent, but there's something like militaristic. I think it could just be like the mention of Raytheon. about the electrification of the sheep. And like, is there something in like the Aeneid where the shepherds get involved in some battle? Like, and like, could this be the sheep got involved in the battle? Like, I don't know. It's like, I think we talked the last time about how somebody drew a parallel of like, there's this poetry by Virgil and all of that like pastoral element made it into the Bible, and that's why we have like the Lamb of God and stuff, and like all that persists to this day. But if he wrote it a little bit different, so instead of like the shepherds getting involved in the battle, the sheep got involved, and now we have this mental idea that sheep are militaristic, and that was like the seed like 2000 years ago, and that's why we made electric sheep.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the story, but it feels like there's slight parallels to, like to like the Nexus 6. Like they were meant to fight our wars, whatever the off-world stuff was going on.
Right, like how does this overlap with the robotic dogs that they're developing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all the things that in San Francisco, right? They're saying like they can shoot people, like the dogs can shoot people or whatever.
That tried to happen, but it didn't happen, right? Or did it happen?
They passed it and repealed it. They got very close.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, but like, do the sheep get drafted? Like, oh, past a certain model number, like we've made, military upgrades for them, and as these military upgrades are compatible from, iteration, 3.2 and forward, so they just automatically wake up and disappear. You wake up one morning, your sheep is gone. It's gone out to the battlefront. Defected.
I've been reading my daughter the Book of Exodus in LOLCAT and New International Version for the last while, and we've gotten to the point where they talk about the incredibly detailed nature of the sort of anatomical splitting and breakdown of the specific location of all of the blood sacrifice on the altar and the tabernacle, and thinking about the idea that these are actually Raytheon sheep. Then it's kind of the provision of ordnance and the construction, like the construction and maintenance of actual battle bots, like the relationship between like the strength of the tribe and its ability to kind of sacrifice these sheep. But if these sheep are made out of, something that Theo Janssen talks about a lot is the fact that we're all made out of corpses. We're just reconstituted dead bodies that we've kind of made ourselves into as life bodies. But with the electric sheep, sort of reconstituting, these things for the purposes and the maintenance of the machine, be it the tribal machine or the war machine, quite literally out of those kind of blocks of things, I think is really fun to play with, and actually fitting all of these weird, gross, dead sheep legs together.
What if they were harvesting urban trash and building new electric sheep out of that? So they were literally just scavenging in a way for cities to stay clean and accommodate.
Yeah, or they're what are those? What do they call them? Mostly, they in Africa, where like all the where all the electronics are, the fields of the trash of electronics.
Yeah. So then they're going to merge into effect from these fields of trash where some robots got like into self-repair and have figured out how to do it, and eventually they've invaded urban areas for parts and steal cars and stuff.
Yeah, Brandel, Theo Janssen, just separate, but one time we had an opportunity to do a workshop with him at the Art Center in grad school. He's a really awesome. I love his work and what he does there. It's really yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure that if anyone else, Thomas or Dre or David, Filippo. Hello, Filippo. You good? How are things? Busy? I mean, it's awesome. Busy at work. How's that going?
Oh, it's good. Yeah. Good to be here. It's been a while. It's chugging along. It's the last minute meetings that kill me. Everybody wants to meet on a Friday for some reason. So apologies, I'm late. But I was just like listening. I have no idea about this project you're talking about. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, we can listen back to the recording. but it is super fun. I'm super excited about it. But I wanted, because you sent a note and I about the F91W, and you're at a point where it's like, yeah, need some help. And I just thought it was like, well, I mean, Nikita's still, you know, on the hook in a pleasant way, not on a gun to his head kind of way. So if you need me to, you know, maybe we should just kind of wrangle him back in and see if he's got some headroom.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Maybe we can set up a meeting during the week. I was actually, whilst I was listening to you guys, I was checking Mouser has in stock the microcontrollers that initially we plan on using. So it might be worthwhile, instead of just like losing so much time, or at least talking for myself, trying to figure out how to use a new coding environment. I can just buy the microcontroller, do a little bit of rejigging on the boards, get them to fabrication, so spin basically another set of boards. But at least we can plug them into an Arduino, and we can get the prototyping going.
Because there are a bunch of new people, do you want to describe the project that you're show running?
Yes. So the F91W is Casio's cheapest watch that you can buy on Amazon. I think it's like $10 or something like that. It's an iconic piece of design and is very utilitarian. So we were thinking, well, so utilitarian that actually I didn't know that initially, but if you fly in the US with one of those, you get flagged by TSA as potential security risk, because it's used, or it was used, I guess, in Afghanistan for remote triggering of explosive devices. So that's a good self-note, that don't travel with the watch. But all this is to say, we were interested in looking at how we can take something as utilitarian as the Casio, the F91W, and like, what would it be its role in the future? How does it appear in the future? Does it have a future? And kind of in parallel, ask ourselves the question, what is the future of time, and how do we represent time? What kind of values does it embody in the future? So this deep rabbit hole came from someone, I don't remember who, like ages ago, that shared in Discord. There's someone who redesigned the internal bits of the Casio watch and used a gorgeous OLED screen. It has like this blue hue. It's just gorgeous. And they were trying to make it into a smartwatch, you know, something that could connect to your phone, whatever. So we're not really interested in making something smart. It still has to be a dumb watch, but it has to have that kind of beautiful OLED screen that then we can use as a platform to explore, you know, how to show time, what time means in the future. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so Filippo's been doing a lot of the engineering work to build the at least, you know, from the beginning, like I would say, like the reference platform in a way that will then we'll figure out all the miniaturization, and but to have something that we can make a few of them and begin to experiment with and prototype what the functionality would be. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're in deep agreement with, like, this isn't from the watch future that we'd expect. So when Filippo says like the smartwatch, it's like, we're not interested in a watch that can pair with your phone kind of thing, but more something that is just so orthogonal to our expectations that it forces people to imagine that, like, oh, actually time could be, you know, the way in which humans use, you know, time or understand time could be entirely different. My current favorite thing is, I'll just keep saying it because maybe it'll get baked into it, is that essentially, you know, you have the watch and you press one of the buttons and that's the start of your day. Like, anyone else's day be damned. And I like that kind of independence. And then, because then you start people saying like, that doesn't make any sense. How would people coordinate? That's a good question. Maybe there are other ways in which people coordinate. That doesn't have to be time. It could be like, you know how I coordinate with Filippo? I call him and I say, hey, do you want to meet in 20 minutes? Can you meet in 6 hours? Is there still time in your day? And people will be like, what does that mean? What do you mean, is there still time in his day? It's like, well, I don't know when his day started. He gets up at 6, you know, and he has his coffee before he starts his day, and at 6:30 when he's done with his coffee and he's feeling ready, he hits the button. It's like, right, okay, now it's 8 a.m. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I think there was we had a conversation, I think, at some point with Thomas as well, that with Green Pages, they were thinking about tropes and that movies nowadays don't have anymore. That scene where they're gonna break into the vault or something and they synchronize the watch altogether. That we kind of lost that in the last few years, and so that kind of resonates with what Julian was just saying, that, you know, if you want to synchronize with someone, be in the same room and click the button together, and you know, that's how you synchronize. So there's a lot of playfulness in that, and you know, the idea is to basically get the engineering nerdy stuff done, so then we can just, you know, play around with it, really. And in that spirit, I think it might be worthwhile having kind of a side chat or something with anyone who's interested, really, maybe during the week, and figure out.
I was just
Yeah.
literally trying to find you on here where to start to communicate with you on Sidebar. So which Discord?
In Near Future Laboratory.
Yeah, but
in the channel F91W.
Oh, F91W. F91W, yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right,
There
I
you go.
have some PDFs and some other kind of prior art I'll send you, but I'd love to chat about it.
Please, yeah, absolutely. Anybody, like, it would be great if we get as many people as possible. That channel's been a bit silent recently, and you know, it's on me as well. I haven't been very active on it, so.
I have this thing I call the resonant time chakra, which is the RTC is based on the moment in the middle, and then an hour, and then a day, and then a week, and then a month, and then a year, and then the Saturn year. And you sort of put clock hands on all parts of that, and it gives you a different appreciation for the quiet parts and the active parts, and how there's sort of coherence at different levels of temporal scale. And it gives you a way to think about strategically projects, whether they're big or small, in the same sort of way. It's useful. And I got like a little moon planner that actually has some science to it, and a big calendar, a piece of print art. So I'm happy to send you those, and you can, you know, incorporate however you want. But it's a great conversation.
No, absolutely. Don't send them to me directly. Please put them, you know, in the public channels, because
yeah, actually, for sure.
Fantastic. No, thank you. What I find very funny is RTC is the chip that you actually need. It's called real-time clock to make a chip count time. So there's already an overlap right there.
I also call it the resonant time calendar.
There we go.
Yeah, so RTC again. Yeah. So yeah, okay, cool. I look forward I'm glad to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too, Philip. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm I guess from the hardware standpoint, my only update is I finally finished to test everything. So, well, everything besides the screen. So everything works, also the flash. So it's like a little chip that you need so that you can load information, like for example, images or, you know, fonts and that kind of stuff. So that works as well. The buttons work. I was kind of stumped for a while. Everything was right, you know, in CAD, and then the buttons weren't working. It just turns out that I did crappy soldering.
It's always the simplest thing, you know, the thing you'd be like, yeah.
No, I was there with like the oscilloscope and the logic analyzer, and I was like, why is this not working?
Yeah.
And then I was just like, you know, out of desperation, just chucked it on actually my iron that I use for my clothes, because at least it heats everything, you know, coherently, and then hit it with a little bit of hot air on top, and it reflowed, and it just worked. So I was just like, anyways, it's not the I don't have the perfect setup for soldering at home, but you got to do what you got to do.
You do. Yeah. I was using the you know, like the equivalent of like the George Foreman grill for quite a while. A hot plate style. It works, you know. It seems a little bit rough and ready.
Yeah,
Does the job,
beautiful.
though.
I had my sister gifted me ages ago, I don't know why, like a teppanyaki grill. you know, like the ones that you find at what is it, Benihana, you know, where they do like whatever, which was electric. And I was like, I don't have space for this, but it got repurposed for my electronics. Now I use it to bake.
Nice. Cool. Thanks, and good to see you. And you don't need to apologize for being busy. It's all part of the game. And I'll reach out to Nikita and try to see if we can find a time. ABC Solarpunk.
The report. Oh yeah, David, you've been doing all the work in the past couple of weeks, so
yeah,
I'm gonna let you roll with this one.
That's fine. I've just been plugging away at the I think that was really unblocking when Dre was like, let's do this layout that's like not full spread.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of going through the images that we have, and in the course of like relaying them out, like a lot of them now just look really old. It's crazy how good Midjourney is. Like there are some that are 6 months old, and 6 months ago I was like, that's fantastic, that's the one. And then like, you know, you put it against some of the stuff that we did more recently, and it's like, now I need to redo it because it looks terrible. And it's harder to get some of the same like vibe out of some of them. So yeah, I did Zeppelin earlier in the week. It took a while. And then I'm kind of just like, I'm not a graphic designer by any means. So like I'm using this like 12 by 12 grid to lay out the sheets. I'm kind of using like a quarter for the text and a bit more like the 3/4 for the image. But then I had come across like this book before, well, blurry, but it's like a grid raster system by Joseph Muller-Brockman. And I'm trying to read it just to check to see if there's that one. Trying to read it to check to see if there's like anything in there that is like, yeah, I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah, I think it comes with the Illustrator now. That's like required.
It just comes with the,
yeah, Swedish grid systems are like the thing.
So people, like anybody who wants to jump in here who knows more about this stuff, like I can link to the InDesign files, or like I can make PDFs and people can do like critique. So yeah, that would be super helpful if somebody's like more au fait with graphics and layout.
You're definitely on the right track with the raster system. Absolutely. And by using a grid, you're probably 75% closer to being a graphic designer than design thinkers. So you're on the right track.
Cool. So I think like there's still a couple of like really beautiful full spreads that like Dre's done that are like composites, and I don't really want to touch them because they're so nice. But I think soon we'll get to the point where all of the ones that are that need to be updated will be updated, and at that point, like I would like to organize a formal crit session, so like people can come in and give feedback about anything, and then do another round. And it would be useful to know like what a good format for that is. I'm not. This is my first InDesign project. I noticed like they will allow you to share and you can get comments, and I just don't know if like you're required to have an InDesign license to participate. And if you are, we'll just make PDFs. But I think, yeah, it would be good to get feedback soon.
Yeah, you need a license, FYI. Sorry.
What you could do, David, is you could share it in that share button at the top right of InDesign. You could just share it as a web link, and then you don't. I don't think you need a license. I think you can just. It's meant to be shared with anyone.
Like I can probably just do for like what's in progress now, just because people can just check to see if they can log in. Like it's too early, I think, to do feedback on some parts of it, but checking that would be good.
Is it this sort of thing where you can actually just like do you save your prompts so that you can just like put them back in, and do you get different results now?
So when I started doing this, I did not know about the seed trick. So all of my prompts are like random, and so like if I run them again, they'll be different. But the main thing is that some of them were like 2 generations of the engine past. So even if you just put the same prompt in, if you had the same seed, I think the output would be different. The one other thing was at the time, in order to try to get some kind of stability in the style, we were saying, hey, can you give us this in the style of Studio Ghibli? And subsequently, like aping somebody's style like that has become like really frowned upon. So we're actually trying to redo those ones that were like, yeah, can this be in this particular artist style? And the way that we're trying to form, like, have a coherent but like not rigidly similar style is you can use this -- Niji switch to tell Midjourney to use their anime up renderer. And that makes like a really cool, like, you know, illustration cartoony style, but without, you know, saying it's like we're ripping off a particular artist. That's ripping off like all the artists. So maybe that's better.
I'm kind of a little bit conflicted on that stuff. I'm not it's just more at a meta level. You know, I don't know. When I was well, I mean, even still, it's like I'm like, man, Alex Soth's my boy. Like, how does he do that? Let me try. You know, and we're, you know, I would consider ourselves like professional friends. Like, I did a bunch of seminars with him, and he wasn't saying like, don't copy me. He was like, am I mentoring you? Are you learning something? Are you, you know, developing your style? And in the same way that, you know, my niece's partner was like, this is what I'm gonna do with the ChatGPT thing with the students. I'm gonna say like, are you learning something? Are you evolving? Are you able to make it? Does it help you make it yours? Yeah, and whatever one's challenge might be, you know, in the creative consciousness, to be like, how do I get to be as good as this person who I admire, right? Like when I was playing saxophone, I wasn't good, but I would get transcripts of like Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, and I would rehearse the fuck out of them. And I remember one concert I played, it's like basically it was like note for note solo because the changes were the same, and I felt good about it, you know, because I felt like, you know, I'm not gonna get a record deal, but I'm like, I loved it. And no one was like, man, that was stupid. You copied Charlie Parker. And it's like, first of all, I didn't, because my intonation is nowhere near his. And, you know, it just kind of, I don't know, it just becomes part, it's integrated into, and you're just integrating, right? Integrating the practice.
Can you put a frame around that regarding scarcity versus abundance? Because I feel like all of this stuff arises out of the notions of property and how we manage scarcity. And these technologies are abundant, they're just fruitful. And so
fruitful, generative, it takes you places. It's you're not like, look, I mean, you know, some people, I think it's an old fashioned perspective to be like, what is it, you know, I guess it's a question like, what does it mean to copy? Like, is it a copy in that way? And am I trying to represent this as, no, that's not a Stephen Shore photograph. That's Stephen Shore didn't have that style. This is my style. Or if someone says like, hey, that looks like a Stephen Shore photograph, am I supposed to be embarrassed that I admire his style and technique, and, you know, and I went out and I bought you know, like an old roll of Ektachrome to kind of get the tonality. And I'm doing that. And it's the same thing, like, you know, Virgil Abloh was like, you know, fashion is notoriously for people getting kind of you know, up in airs about, I talked to you about this, I showed this in my portfolio, and now you're representing it as yours. And it's
and
like,
I think,
well,
yeah, I think like for this project as well, it's like we're not trying to make an art book. Like, we're not trying to make a book of really nice art and sell it to you as art. We're trying to make an idea book. And so it's like the ideas are the thing that we're trying to develop, and the illustration is kind of like really like just one representation of the idea. And the book would be the same book if we hired an illustrator to illustrate all of the things with their own style. Like, that's not the meat. It's kind of like the the surface part.
I guess, I mean, so I guess part of my point is like, you know, I'm sensitive to it, and also, I mean, you know, David and Dre, you're the showrunner, so I'm just like, whatever, but I am interested in the conversation, and part of me is like kind of nudges in like, I would welcome the accusation, not because I'm looking to pick a fight, but I'm looking, like, we're trying to open a conversation. Like, you know, what we saw when we went to this world was that actually humans are collaborating with robots, and robots these particular kind of android intelligence have learned from the past, as many artists do.
Well,
And I know the artist consciousness wants to be so unique in the universe. The snowflake, I'm so unique. And
but
just,
isn't it
just doesn't
also
happen.
about teaching people how to see the world? Like that's why painters paint, is to teach people how to see the world. And so if I can appropriate these goggles for a moment and slide my picture in and see what Van Gogh would have done with it, why wouldn't Van Gogh be super psyched about that? The only reason is because he's making his living on his paintings and he feels scarce about it in some fashion. Or that it's like, oh, well, those are Van Gogh eyes and not Matisse eyes. And, I want to make sure you guys know my name. And that's, again, just like, that's such a temporary figment when you compile all of human history into the thing. And how would we want to, I just don't understand how appropriation can be like so wrong that we can't have all of human art history in a box at our call, now that we can put it in a box at our call. That's just insane.
From
I think it's just a matter of
practical
like you get
perspective,
fired and not have any job or ability to support yourself or your family. And that's kind of like, well, you're fucked. Welcome to America. So the fear is very legitimate, given that like you don't get any welfare. You're just going to be unemployed and useless, and maybe you can make coffee.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's
Like,
the fact of it though is that AI isn't just coming for artist jobs, it's coming for every blue collar job on the list, or white collar job on the list. And the blue collar jobs, it's not getting around to first.
that's because we already figured out how to make them like work for jack shit.
I mean, it seems to me like it's a pretty good commentary on like where the creative class seems to situate itself. Like it somehow thinks of it as itself as like independent from these things. Like, I don't know, there's like this starving artist that is like actually just like the child of rich parents. Meanwhile, like somebody else is just like, has a blue collar job that's like much more stable. And like, oh no, my job is insecure. It's like, yeah, your whole lifestyle was like actually a marginal experience. Like, welcome to the fold. Everybody else is experiencing insecurity. Like, figure it the fuck out. I don't know. I mean, like, I went to art school and I found myself so tired of
That's just pointing fingers at the other, though. It's not really a solution or even a counter argument.
Well, but like, what's the point of art, right? Like, I think something that's like a little bit weird here is like, oh, it's copying my style. It's like, you're supposed to be an artist for a lifetime, aren't you? Like, shouldn't you have some kind of sustainable practice here where like you're able to, make meaning that actually.
To me, the purpose of art is to build bridges, just to answer your question. So it's the only one of the cultural pillars that builds bridges instead of separates classes, or classes by ideas, by economics, by religion, by intellectual class. The arts is the only one building bridges.
So
I think there's a difference though between the use of this, like, I think when David was talking about the fact that these are illustrations for telling a story in a book. I did illustration for medical instruction, sort of med school and pre-med for the better part of 10 years. And, so I drew pictures of vivisected frogs and exactly how the diaphragm works and what it looks like when somebody has atherosclerosis. And I'm proud of the work that I did. It looks nice, and it's fun to kind of go back and look over all of the gravely shiny bits that are inside a person's body. But it wasn't art in the same way as people sort of think of the high art stuff, and it was really for an explicit sort of communication purpose. As it was, I did it in Adobe Illustrator, and I was able to build a set of brushes and systems that other people within the organization were able to pick up and do a worse job of always than I was able to do. But it was establishing the communication style. Like, this is how you talk about these kinds of weird tubes, and this is how you color those ones. And yeah, like for me, I can't do that work anymore. I'm contractually not allowed to do it, and I'm not in the same country anyway. But the thing that was interesting for me was establishing the schema of how you address certain problems with it, And the totality of it, all of that work, I mean, there was just hundreds and hundreds of images over the years. Just we're discussing sort of sections of cicadas and frogs and all kinds of things that you're supposed to cut up in order to hopefully learn a little bit about the human body. And yeah, like they're not pictures I would have chosen to do as a sort of artistic kind of function. And so, like, I think the fact that we haven't pinned down what art is sort of complicates the problem of what is AI art. But I think that the problem of what is AI illustration is actually a lot more pragmatic. And yeah, like in this context, if it's doing a specific visual communication job, then it's that.
It's sort of humorous that AI learned how to shoot down sort of the highest thing in human development first. And so everybody who's got practical jobs is looking at it and going sort of, oh, well, sorry, the artists don't know what to do about that. They're not going to really care because nothing's really injured. And we're getting better pictures out of everything for less. So there's going to be a certain amount of discounting of the problem just because artists are always seen as marginal and impractical, when in fact, we're the only ones looking around and going to be able to say what's going on. So my hope is that we all become artists, right? We all adopt a better way of seeing over the air gap and expressing ourselves more clearly. So maybe by being the first to be killed off, we're also the first to adopt the new wave of tools, one might hope. But it's coming for every white collar job. There's just no question. It's already got its bar and its past medical exams. And how can they not think this is going to be a common problem? Everybody can't make coffee for everybody else.
Like, isn't it fine as long as the working class decides that they need universal basic income? Like, I don't know, it just seems like to me like this is sort of just, the sort of stepping stone to like, oh wait, we need to be cared for because
what is the progression though? Is it to USB or what is there some other way? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that to me seems like a functional use of this space of like of the futuring, right? Like if the near future is universal basic income, like is it ushered in by Midjourney? Is that the thing that got us there?
Well, I tried to start a group trying to use the tools to visualize utopia, and it immediately goes sour and becomes dystopic faster. That's what's so amazing about Julian's shepherding of this group is it's not a bunch of ire, and yeah, it's sort of hopeless how badly people can't see forward. And I think it's because we're all marketed to be hungry,
Yeah.
To
Well,
want
again,
the shine.
like,
Go ahead.
I think a universal basic income thing is cool, but that's like assuming that we're all displaced, we can get behind that. But like, if it's just 30% of people are displaced, well, that means 2/3 of people are going to vote down that universal basic income.
You guys familiar with the term evangelical? What's the term? Prosperity, where they believe that because God has been nice to them and they've earned a lot of money because they've been short on their employee checks. They obviously are doing it right though, because they have the money, and those guys suck. They don't even have health care. So God doesn't love them. It's just
it's the prosperity gospel. It's like for people who want to be Christians without reading anything Jesus ever said.
Yeah, but there's a genuine kind of like, oh, you're sick, God must not love you, therefore I can't, I don't want to get involved with you. And like, so I sort of go, well, you guys just don't understand. All the refugees were your neighbors last month, and they just don't see how close they are to the edge of the world, The flat earth theory conversation, there's no flat earth. It's really a metaphor for how people don't want to look at the edge of the real world, the brink that they're really on. It's a strange way to what?
In order to, who do we have to displace? Whose work do you have to displace first to generate the necessary political will?
Yeah, or the political reality that it is something that could happen in my backyard, or something like the Ohio thing. I think is interesting. in that regard.
Mm.
Everybody has train tracks.
I look forward to the book, though, David.
Who's doing the housing thing? Who's doing the 1,000-year housing vision? Or I saw somebody post something on the Discord. Just really briefly, a note went by. Nobody knows. I'll go look.
I got sidewalks. That's all. The houses
I did
that are built.
I did some mid-journey explorations on that. Nothing I want to share yet, but yeah, I did play around with it a bit.
Drew, it's pretty hard to get the machine to understand what a skateboard does, isn't it? It does all kinds of weird curves. I had the same problem. It turned out the same kind of like weird, just like it has no idea how to treat it.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to stand on those mid-journey skateboards. It's going to be difficult.
I just got into a fight about an escalator. I only want up escalators. I don't want down escalators. And escalators always come in pairs. And so that was difficult. And then I wanted to talk to you about parkour. Because how close together is the skateboarding paradigm with the parkour paradigm?
Not very. I mean, it depends on which part of skateboarding. Like the skateboarding that I'm talking about is one where you don't leave the ground, and the whole parkour thing is like, oh, I can go from over here to over here without walking. So I would say that there's like, the sort of mainstream street trick skateboarding and parkour have a lot related, except that parkour does a lot of like upscaling, right?
Right, which you need to do if you're going to do gravity drops to get across the city.
Well, I mean, I'm like following, Ivan Illich's sort of like 15 miles an hour kind of thing, right? Like, how do we make sure that nobody's ever going above running speed that doesn't want to?
But if I build an environment that's totally accommodating to skateboarders, there's going to be people who are parkouring, and the compatibility of parkour and your skateboard's on your back, and then you're rolling, and then you're flying, and then you've got more distance. The whole thing goes, it's just great.
I don't know. The more I've thought about it, the more I'm like, all I really need to have happen is that the right angle curve just needs to be an S. And if we started there, you could do that across an entire city, minimum viable product, and like that alone might change people's minds. I'm like trying to figure out like how little can you change things, in order for this to be really, really good. And
not encouraging this, but there was that I think it's somewhere in the Discord, but there was the person in like Tucson or someplace that started cutting curbs in a neighborhood and doing, I can't remember what it was, doing something agricultural, like planting.
You're talking about the Lancasters in Tucson, Arizona, and they started cutting curbs and farming water in the city.
And it cooled the neighborhood. It cooled the neighborhood down was the thing. And they just did it. And at first it was like, hey, stop that. You can't do that. But then people were like, actually, this kind of works.
Yeah,
I'm not saying do that, Aaron. I'm not saying going.
Yeah, that's the Lancaster brothers in Phoenix, and I've toured his property and like with him. He's a great guy, and he's got a book on I don't remember the name of it, but it's about dry terrain water, urban water harvesting. Yeah,
that's the part of this question. Like, one of the city's main issues is like surface water. So if there's actually a way to sort of like do the new skateboards, like skatable sidewalk design in a way that also improves surface water, then you're really starting to get some.
Well, I was definitely starting to think about crash areas and softer things to run into. So like I used to dive bomb down hills and bail into, this set of bushes and stuff like that. So like it's interesting to really make the environment safe as well for, if you look at how highways are designed, there's some pretty hardcore considerations, and guardrail designs and stuff that seem like lethal, but also necessary. Yeah. Oh, somebody left.
Yeah, I went to this thing that Julian sent me to on Tuesday night. It was like a Futures of Cities type deal, and they had somebody that Julian's interviewed on the podcast. There's somebody else that you might know too, Jason from Future Forms. He's like the public arts guy. I mentioned you. He said I was in good hands. Anyways, but their whole thing was like, okay, community engagement. Like, you got to ask the public what it wants. You know, does it want ping pong tables out in the street or whatever? And I'm just like, I'm finding myself a little bit impatient with that approach, because like the car lobby has won in America, and we have like cookie cutter landscapes that have been made by virtue of like having things that scale. And so this idea of like local solutions for everything just seems like there's not enough time for local solutions for everything. Like, we need things that actually only work if they I mean, we've talked about this in the climate space too, but it's like, as far as urbanism is concerned, like, what are the things that we can do across an entire city?
Well,
Right,
this
so, like,
gets exactly to the conversation of, do you appropriate good ideas, or do you have to respect who did them? Like, that's exactly the same conversation we're having about Midjourney, except inverted, and it's all about appropriation and property and trade secrets and property and solutions and property. And every time you look at anything you want to do, really, it comes back to property in some stupid way. And it's going to be a barrier to entry for a couple of these sort of technological changes. I think that's what the singularity starts to be. It's like a capacitor. It has to have a reservoir of no in order to like charge up the circuit and make the change.
you say a reservoir of no, like the word.
Yeah, that's
no.
what I said. Yeah.
Yeah.
A reservoir.
Like, you know, when you talk about more trees, soft places to land and stuff like that has to be standardized, right? Like, basketball courts are standardized, tennis courts standardized, right? You know, right turn, stop signs are standardized. Like, we need to be able to have a
Cloverleafs.
reliable. And like, you know, I love like the winding way and all that, but like, we've already been through the Haussmannization of France. Like, that was 200 years ago, you know, like unless we want to go back to like a completely sort of meandering type space, but that's like counter to. the
Could you
building systems we
retrofit New York City with a 5th story set of cycling tubes? So they were just all aerial and you just rode your skateboard up in the air?
Either that or just 5th story shade so that you could ride your skateboard on the sidewalk when it was snowing out, you know? Either might be
You got to
cheaper.
switch to your ski board.
Right. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's funny to me that everybody like really wants these really local solutions for stuff. And I wonder to what extent that's just like a vestige of this sort of exactly this artist idea. Like, oh, it has to be unique. It's like, we all sit, we all stand, we all lie down, we all shit, piss, eat. Like, what, like, can't we make some stuff that's sort of like non-verbally really good and like just feels good for everybody? It seems weird to me that everybody would, it just seems very gatekeeping to me that everybody would need sort of like a bespoke solution.
Community
at the same time,
engagement. Yeah. Community engagement can be a real black hole, and eventually nothing gets done, especially if you're not bringing anything to the community. So I think you're definitely on the right track on building and creating something, you know, data fictions, design fictions to bring to the community for them to respond to. It's just like any kind of work meeting or anything like, or design meeting or anything like that. You come with them with a blank page and say, what do we do? Right. And that a lot of times community engagement is like that. So let's, you know, they instead of bringing ideas to respond to and actually get a response from the community, they're bringing nothing and expecting the community to give them a response. And a lot of times that's what's going on, and nothing ever gets done. You just go in circles that way. You have to bring something to the table to be responded to first. So
yeah, I don't know. I'm curious, Julian, if there's anything in the design fiction toolkit that's like, how do you get stuff out of people that's like not just some existing ideology, right? Like, how do you prod people enough to get them outside of
watch my fingers.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, that's what we try to do with General Seminar. I'm not saying it's perfected, but I think that kind of putting people, you know, it seems to work. I mean, been, you know, with clients as well as people who are more willing to, you know, do the fun wacky game of getting into the crappy time machine with the broken button and the time setting dial that just is like spinning mechanically free, like it's broken. This thing's broken. Oh, we're gonna go someplace. and you put people and even people who are like you think are so serious, they start out serious, like chief scientist of nut meat oils for ADM. So person with an incredible portfolio of responsibility. Like gray haired, been like a food scientist for 37 years. Let me tell you my time at, averting famine in such and so country back in 1958 kind of person. You say that we're going to get in a time machine. You're waiting for them to be like, the fuck you talking about? Like, I'm a serious scientist, 2 PhDs. And after a while, they just kind of melt into it once they realize what's going on, because they have a different context in which to express their dreams, whereas before their dreams have only been expressed through research reports,
Extraordinary vigor.
maybe they lots of structure, maybe certain responsibilities to scientific panels and plenaries where they you kind of melt into that, you kind of that particular role. And I totally get it and understand it. It's basically like the last 32 years of my life has been an 8.5 by 11. That's how I express myself with Arial at 9 point, and that's it. And a couple diagrams instead of like whatever those chemical diagrams are of things reacting, and maybe a pie graph of the flows of particular kinds of nutrients around the world and this kind of thing. And now you're saying we're going to get in a time machine, we're going to go to the future, and they after like 20 minutes you see like, oh, I get this is fun. They're not going to tell you it's fun, but they will, like this one guy did, because he was a tough nut. Dre, were you in that one? No, it was a different project. Tough nut, and afterwards we were all like, man, he was a tough nut. And then 3 weeks later, like an email from him was like, 3 weeks later, he's like, I got to tell you, that was amazing. I know I was a little bit cranky, but we lost a shipment, we lost an entire boatload of soybeans or whatever the fuck was actually on his mind. But he's like, that was great. When can we do it again? So I think that's part of it. It's almost like, I'm not especially religious person at all, but it's like, we're gonna tap into something that is gonna feel weird and slightly like, now we're in the evangelical tent, where we're just.
I've had sort of a similar, like, I find myself sort of almost like echoing your affectation when I talk to people about the skateboarding stuff, because I'm like, oh, walking, biking, skateboarding, what do you mean? It's like the same way that you say it, and it's like, there's this thing that keeps happening. Like you say that people go, what do you mean skateboarding for transportation? And then they like see the world totally differently. Every single time I talk to somebody new about this, they're like, wow, I hadn't thought about it this way before.
Mhm.
And it's like, it does something very similar. So I don't know. I appreciate the point. It's hard to knock people out of their framework. So
Yeah, and I think that the maybe one of probably many lessons learned out of that is respecting where they're at and the challenge that they're having, and also a sense of probably one of the most, in my experience, I'm no expert on human emotions, but one of the most high impact emotions that someone can have is embarrassment and shame. And when you go there with people, it's like, I mean, you can get them to wage war by tapping into that if you wanted to, be like highly manipulative. And so you kind of go there with them, and you sort of sense like, okay, they're embarrassed because they haven't actually really imagined anything since they were 7, and their dad got on them for not drawing the that doesn't look like a football player. Like his feet are too big.
Julian James gets down in it with shame as a cultural force, and how it relates to idealism and stuff like that, but it also relates to like your socialization and your hierarchy and a whole bunch of other things like that. That
it's
it
deep.
cuts. Yeah,
it's deep. So you're asking people to imagine a world, and the first thing they're going to reach for, well, first thing you're going to do is you're going to look up there, because I think the answer is like, I wonder. And then they're going to reach for someone else's dream, basically, is my working thesis. They can be like, well, Elon says, but they're not going to say Elon. They're going to be like, I think it'll be neural implants. And you're like, where did that come from? And if you dig into it, they're like, yeah, you're right. I saw it in the Matrix, and I've just internalized that. to such a degree, and also because I saw it in the Matrix, and also because this guy Elon, who seems to get everything right, and he's just such a force, that's probably going to be the case. Because, and you know, to a certain degree, it's kind of like, yeah, you might be right. I mean, he can write big checks, evidently, so he can bend the will of the material world to his dream. But I think then the work is like, okay, so what really do you want? What kind of world do you want to inhabit? And if you're saying you want to inhabit the neural implant world or whatever, or the Ayn Rand world, you just got to understand it's like you're in someone else's dream. Try to understand that. You know, try to internalize that, and then ask yourself, it's like, well, yeah, actually, you know, maybe I don't want that. I want something else. And so I think that's part of the thing. So you sense that someone's like, they're embarrassed because they're feeling shame because they haven't come up with something, you know, super cool or something that is truly theirs. And so you gotta be really careful around and in that territory. And for me, how do you do it really carefully is you just make it like fun and funny. You know, so this whole thing with like the time machine that's janky and it smells like sweat and machine oil. And then people are kind of like, oh, okay, we're just playing games. It's like, yeah, it's a big game called the future.
Gonna say, sorry to jump in, gang, but that Julian, that point of humor, like it came up somewhere in there.
Yeah, I found that a little bit thinking about just like the
I lost connection there for a second.
just thinking about like the way people like the skateboard thing becomes like more aspirational. Like skateboard accessibility is the same thing as wheelchair accessibility, but nobody wants to think about themselves in a wheelchair. And so it becomes like it's sort of just in line with that shame thing. Like nobody really wants to like address that as an idea. But it's like as soon as you're like in skateboarding space, it's like, oh, I want to do that. Like I've always wanted to be able to get somewhere in a fast and fun kind of way. And so it opens up this sort of blank space. Brandel talked about this idea of like the dog bone. Like people know their home and they know where they work, but they don't know anywhere in between because they just sort of like zip all the way over there. But the skateboard provides sort of that. They're like, oh, there's like all this undiscovered space. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, Steve, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was interested in what you were going to say there, Steve.
No, I'm interested in almost more novella, novel length kind of design fiction, but also maybe coupling it with products. But this notion of humor, like this almost, I don't know if it's sardonic humor or what kind of humor it is, but I picked up on it right away in your work, Julian, and the gang here. And I think, and I was just reading a Honey Wood Adventures, a 1929 book about architecture, and it's a humorous look at a project, and apparently UK architects all had to read this at one time, and it changed their mindset around, okay, this is what to expect. But it was humor. It was all humor to try to take the edge off of this switch in reality. I wonder how important that humor is, or if anybody's dove into that specifically, but it just seems to have naturally come up from what you guys are doing here. I was just really super curious and
cool.
That and more why humor is a secret weapon in business and life. Yeah.
It's sort of a good, interesting reference to that point. I don't think it answers all the questions, but
but so you guys haven't really formally dug into that at all. It's evolved naturally from the work you're doing.
I think it just comes from my I'm not saying generally, but it's where I just kind of go, my instinct goes, I think, to a certain degree, and probably you could tap into that and be like, okay, well that's, you see, it seems to, I don't know, it's obvious. It's more fun than taking things too seriously to the point where it's like, oh man, it feels like work. Oh man, can't you just take it easy? Like just lighten up a little bit. And I'm not saying lighten up because we're not working on like very serious, profound problems, but it's like, well, it seems to work. People seem to be able to relax into the conversation easier. And the point, I think one of the points is like to open up a conversation. So if you can do that when people are like, that's wacky. You created you did like one thing we did for the Corner Convenience was, it was all humorous stuff. It was basically like Jack Daniels infused with like, caffeine or something, which almost seems like obvious, but it was, if you want to be drunk, might as well be wide awake or something. Like, I can't remember what it was, and I don't know where that comes from. There's not a big plan. It's just kind of like, man, that'd be cool. Or like Dre, when we were working on the the AV thing. There's a lot. It's full of humor.
It's
You
so
know,
much
like
fun.
the Kingsford hydrogen briquettes. You know, it's like, what is that about? You know,
Yeah,
like
Kingsford sponsors Burning Man in this
that's
future.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, that's right.
Well, a way of looking at humor. I've always leaned into humor, and even in my time in advertising, there was a trend where everything was really, really sad. You know, like sadvertising was that trend. But and then there's a book called The Smile in the Mind. I think what I think about is that when you apply some humor, you're triggering neurons that you can now associate ideas to a positive emotion. And I think that's the neuroscience behind the idea of attracting honeys, what would be with honeys rather than vinegar. I don't know what the expression is, but and I really leaned into staying humorous in any of the future stuff that I started doing, you know, 5-6 years ago when I started to get more serious about it, because everyone I met in the strategic foresight world is very dire and gloomy and just a real buzzkill, and everyone got very serious and triggered and hard to collaborate with when discussing topics. But when you flip it and you do something a little bit, you take the piss out of it with some humor, people let down their guard. They're able to have serious conversations about it. They don't feel as triggered. They don't feel as and it also it presents the idea as a lot more disposable. Like it can be modified, it can be improved on, it can be expressed differently, and by not taking your own futures thinking too seriously, you open the door for other people to have a say about your thoughts.
And maybe even build on like improv. I love improv. So you build like people
Exactly.
can build on that comedy and maybe take it forward.
Well,
somehow.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day, didn't we, Trey? I think because
Yeah, we did.
Mary and I, my wife and I went to see. She's been taking improv class. We went to improv last Sunday, and on the way back, I listened to the Hard Fork one, the one that you, I think, justifiably questioned, Dre.
Yeah.
And just the mechanic that it's just sentence completion, and I'm stuck with this image of two of the masterful improv people. They were, it was a whole elaborate thing. It wasn't just the audience shouting stuff out, but the audience shouted stuff out, and then an actor of note, I forget his name, told a story that from his real life, and then the story, so it's like 2 degrees away, and these two improv from the 6-person improv troupe, they just kind of instinctively grabbed 2 chairs and faced them to each other and sat down, and you could tell by the expression on their face, they're like, I have no idea what the fuck's gonna happen, but it's gonna be awesome. And you could just tell by the expression, they're just like, oh, here we are.
And they were unafraid too.
It was beautiful. It was so beautiful. And so it was in my mind, it was that connection, I guess, to your point, Dre. Sorry for interrupting.
I mean, I think this like approaching it as not as serious. Like, I think there's like this kind of expectation when you're designing anything or like thinking about anything that you need to like fully fix the issue. But when you design with like humor and a story behind it, you get to like accept that this, whatever you're making isn't going to perfectly fix the problem. And instead it's like something to be talked about. And like, what's like, is this, it's really hard to make something when it has to be perfect, but it's a lot easier to make something when it can be funny and like riffed off of. And it, like the point of it is to like create more ideas to make rather than to like solve world hunger. That's not.
I just have to say, like when the story I told about the electric sheep thing, that was it. That felt improvisation. I mean, there is humor. I mean, the humor is undergirding it in a way that, but the fact that it was an improvisational thing. It was just like that initial thing. Like, let's go to the jazz metaphor. Like, I play a melody, and then Jed comes along, and he says, what are you doing? And he tries something, and then it continues to build to now where it's like, we got a project with this weird book and these electric sheep. And it was all, there was nothing, there was no master plan. There was no program manager with a structure around it telling us what it needed to be. It just became.
So you know, Julian, the question of like, when you were talking about the serious guy and how he said it was fun, to me, like the design conversation, when I get to do that kind of leadership, it's about shifting the what's broken conversation to the what's missing conversation. And when you get somebody who knows their field really well, and you start to say, well, what's missing from this to make it greater or better or newer or more, they're not used to that conversation because they're usually just dealing with problems for one. But if you can bring the fun to it and you start being absurd about it, then they start making up absurd things from the basis of their expertise. And I think that's why you get innovative answers. And some of them are silly, but that makes everybody laugh because it's really related to the situation that they're in, and they can picture that absurd thing happening. And so to me, that I've always been the one making up crazy ideas, and I didn't even notice other people weren't doing it for a really long time. And so, you know, it's the opposite problem for me, is to find traction where other people are willing to play. I'm more like the dog, you know, just wants to play tug all the time. And
My dog,
yeah, exactly. And they're just waiting to party. He's just waiting back there for you to say yes. But the what's missing conversation brings about an emergent kind of humor, because people start making up silly things, and the sillier the better, because then you start to discern, and later you sift and you figure out which that's valuable, or you know, you get people daydreaming a little bit.
Reminds me of, like, there's a sort of a trick in writing fiction. Julian, you do this really well when you talk about the time machine. You have to put 3 things in the room to make any space feel real. So you say, okay, well, there's the broken knob, and then it smells sweaty, and then there's this other knob that says this. And it's like, by just having 3 points in the room, you allow somebody to be in that space and they can situate themselves.
I think the situating aspect of the humor is really important. Something that I'm really into the idea of embodied cognition, and that we think with our bodies in the spaces that we reside within. And one of the issues that one of the things that's really appealing about design fiction is that it's so intensively presence making, that you are in a space with a thing where you can imagine it, because all of the details, the warts and all are there. And I think one of the things that we kind of, as professionals, begin to neglect is how well cultivated and how sort of domain specific the receptive frames of reference that we sort of reside within for our professional life is. And so humor is a way of sort of attacking and breaking that. And so the irreverent subject material, like people analyzing a cereal box, is a lot easier for them to be expansive with than the specifics of the catalytic converter. And I think that we've all kind of, for better and in many ways mostly worse, developed frames of reference for the future and for science fiction that allow us to have these pretty kind of willful suspension of disbelief responses to science fiction or futuristic environments, and humor causes us to kind of erode a little bit of that and really think about where the charging port or where the license plate has to go on the Cybertruck. You know, what happens when people start putting additional kind of registration stickers on them, things like that. It humanizes them.
I have to jump, but I'll just give a quick shout out to Green Pages. We're doing a workshop at 4 p.m. Pacific time today. So if anyone wants to kind of embody what we're talking about right now in terms of using humor to create design fictions around filmmaking in Hollywood and like the kind of the future of that, we had a really fun time on Monday talking about like live filmmaking, where we're generating prompts live as to an audience, as kind of like that. It stemmed from this improv conversation. Trey has a friend who integrated Touch Designer into, or Stable Diffusion into Touch Designer, and is able to like live generate moving images And we were thinking like, oh, that's like a new piece of filmmaking. And then we had an awesome conversation about that. And so
We
hopefully
need that
will,
as a Zoom window right here.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That sounds wild.
So if anyone wants to come at 4 today, I'll probably post again in general with the Zoom link, but the Zoom link is there. So
Yeah, 4 Pacific. Yeah.
thanks everybody.
Julian, I
Thomas.
pushed that I pushed that AI artist to your link. You can drop it whatever forum it makes sense. Steve, what do you do?
Oh, it's a really good question. Actually, what do I do? I take my daughter to school in the morning, so
Good
I'm
man.
like getting here. But other than that,
Manifest love and care. That's beautiful.
yeah, other than that, I'm actually a doctoral student right now. I had coffee with Julian a couple weeks back, and I just haven't made it here yet. But you guys weren't kidding. You do just sort of, you are here all morning, so I thought I would just, I'm having my lunch, I call it, and so I jumped in. So doctoral work, it's through the School of Architecture here in University of Calgary. And I've been looking at a methodology of innovation that's non-sticky note. We were just hacking on sticky notes there, but non-sticky note oriented that elders could get involved in, and elders can help to make their future better. I'm calling it actually TAPS now. So third acts purpose. And so not only to address potentially their past but also to help with the cognition, the mental health side, to help elders get some purpose. And so
Third act's purpose.
Third act's purpose. Yeah. So
I have a project called 3-Word Me, and it's a mnemonic memory castle kind of thing. So
okay, interesting.
Third act's purpose fits right in.
Nice.
Yeah,
and it was the Wicked Impact story exchange. So it's tap wise. So then the Wicked Impact part is it's a wicked problem apparently with where we're going to go with our elder population. I feel like the mental capital in that population, us included, I guess, or many of us with the gray hair here, but that is going to go to waste if we don't figure out a way to kind of I don't want to use the word harvest, but employ all that mental capital. Yeah. So that was part of it. And then, so what's the methodology? And I struggled for a long time, and I was writing a novel, and then suddenly, boom, it crisscrossed with my doctoral work. And I'm like, wait a second, what about story? And story was a therapy thing. And then it just all like, boom, it just came out and filtered out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to do something around story with this as a methodology. And then that led me down this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, which now I've decided to open this door, Julian. So I'm here today. I'm not a joiner, just so you know, I don't join anything. And so for me to actually be here today it's not, I'm an introverted kind of anxiety ridden kind of individual. So this is not comfortable for me, but going into, with this area of design fiction. So it was literally the last reference I found. I found Tony Fry's work. I found all kinds of work. And then finally, my thesis chair, Barry Weiland, knew Julian. But we didn't even think of this until it just popped into his LinkedIn one day during our conversations. We had a weekly studio, and boom, Julian's a post or something popped into his LinkedIn. He's like, oh yeah, did you run across this guy yet? And I'm like, no. Who is this guy? I thought I was done like trying to find any more research. And anyway, and then the book and all the rest of it. So that's what led me down this rabbit hole to be here. And I'm like, wow, you guys are like, you're all so like the fact that this is already in progress and going and you're doing this kind of work. And then this humor is the reason why I had to pick on it today, because it just, for me, it's either you cry or you laugh. So when you're dealing with a wicked problem, it seems like you either cry or you laugh, and the laughter seems more productive.
Brandon, let me ask you about something, because I have a thesis and I want to see how it resonates with you. And since we're here, I believe that laughter is feedback in the human organism, and that feedback occurs because of the protagonist of the joke creates a brief point of reference within the person's own constellation, and from there they get a little bit of it fires off from that protagonist's point of view. You identify with the pain, You go over there, you stub your toe, you go, I hate stubbing my toe, I hate stubbing my toe. And then the other part of you gets the signal and you go, ha 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 ha, I stubbed toe, it's not funny. And then you stop laughing. And that's basically how most jokes work. Does that resonate with you? Feedback.
I think there's a feedback process to it. I think that there's the one of the main things that I've heard about is the post, like the post hoc reframing of a context in a way that settles it into a lower energy, that things make more sense, and that the way that it makes sense is comforting. And so it's the resolution of a tension of certain things appearing to be set in a way that has potential conflicts and those being resolved, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Like a cortisol reducer.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. And so it's a lot like learning. And so sometimes people who like funny things like learning things as well. But it's the ability to settle those things into a lower energy. And from a computer science perspective, I think that has a lot to do with the concept of things like data compression and the solidity of some kind of cognitive or mechanical model that you have the ability to support, that you need to sustain in order to be able to kind of live in the world. And so humor is this kind of resolving function of or reward for the resolution of those features.
Well, I like the
That's my
reward.
working
I
theory.
feel like learning is so tightly coupled to laughter. Like a lot of the time when people learn things, they laugh at their old self.
Maybe it opens a
Yeah,
channel
feel quite
towards
nice. Like if they mess up a lick or something, they'll go like they'll like sort of laugh at themselves. And like horses do this too. Like after they've like learned something or they resolve some stress, they go like it's not like just like a random sound. Like they're doing it after they've processed something.
Yeah, blowing off steam.
Steve, I'm curious if you've heard of the 7th generation principle. It's
I don't think so. No.
the Native American concept that like at any given point, like you will know, or like in your life, you will know 7 generations or have the capacity to. There's
I know the
generation
products.
and generate, right, exactly. Yeah, thanks Target for that one. But 3 generations before you, right? Your parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, and then there's your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And so you have this sort of like, you
Correct.
exist in this like 7-generation schema. So, you could be in the middle of it, but you could also be at the end of, you could be at either end of it. You could be that you could be that great-grandchild, or you could be that great-grandparent. Which I think is, also a useful mechanism for this space, right? Because like 7 generations is even though it's 140 years, right? It's still a pretty near future.
Oh yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah. Okay, I'll look into that. I don't know why I just really thought about it. Yeah.
For your purposes of like the third act stuff, right? Like situating that third act somewhere within that the range of 7 generations could be helpful. It also can reduce anxiety socially too. It's been proven that like when you actually see yourself as a part of a multi-generational sort of saga, it can reduce social anxiety.
Didn't know that either. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So you're doing something with memory there, or note taking?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, not so it's a DDES. So we're looking at a practice base. So what I wanted to do is have a methodology, practice base wise, to work on innovation, sort of with elders, for elders, by elders, and hence having a methodology they could engage, but also bringing their stories to bear. So at the widest side of it, I could start collecting a whole big database of stories. I mean, like there's a StoryCorps. There's a few examples of people building these huge databases of stories. Could I mine that for insights specific to that group and provide them more agency and provide voice to that versus right now, I think there's a sort of in the current generation, or the silent generation, sadly, my parents, they were too silent. They got kind of shuffled into a corner unless they had the financial clout to do what they wanted to do as they age in place. So I want to provide some agency and all that, and providing voice. So either they do it through their own stories and get that benefit from sharing the stories. There's definitely some research around that, and then mining those stories to build new stories. And that's hence the fiction comes in to take the pressure off everybody to say, even if they wrote their own stories of fiction, which is what I'm doing right now, is writing my own story as a fiction, growing up with some NHLers, and there's a whole saga with a bunch of well-known NHLers. I won't spoil it, but this is it's been a cathartic process, but then I've learned things as well. So unlocking that for people on a wider basis, but then tying it to innovation was sort of where my research was going. And then having elders actually then maybe vet these stories. So then throwing in Chat GPT, which has been a popular topic here, it looks like, and why not? I want to, and Jillian, so just saying, you guys are rubbing off me already. If I had time, I wanted to, maybe it's been done, I want to create a mock-up of a Word or Google Doc, screen with the AI or Chat GPT drop-down menu, and you just put sliders on it for burstiness, for all these things that changes the tone and the way that AI is writing, and then you just step back and it kind of writes it for you, and then you go in and edit it, or you tweak these sliders, and because to me that's where this is whole going, is like, when does the AI stop and you begin, or you begin and the AI stops when you're writing these things now? So
I've been doing a thing you might want to try and experiment with and see what happens. You create a little introductory prompt which says, imagine you're a very skillful writer, you're working on a historical biography, and you can give it some styles or some source. You can give it source, but just basically one paragraph is enough to get going a lot of the time. And tell it to, write this life story, and then give it a lead in, like, I was born in St. Louis during a thunderstorm, ... And it'll launch. If you give it more details and tone, it really will take off from there. So even if you had a short bit of writing fragment, or if you wanted to kick it into a mystery detective story, maybe that would be good, because then you can say to the AI, feel free to ask questions or something, and maybe get it to be a little bit more repartee. But for me, what I do is I do that, and then it ... start this with some open quotes and an ellipsis, and it'll just pick up immediately in the voice of the story.
Okay.
And then it will sort of say whatever you gave it. It'll just launch that first paragraph. Don't try to say, rewrite this. Don't try to tell it like it's a person. Just say, and then I went to grade school here, and there were 3 kids, and down the street we walked to school every day. And let it write something and say, no, the trees, it was autumn, and it'll rewrite and correct. And you can get into a real back and forth that is pretty fun. I've done things where I told it I wanted it to write short paragraph chapters. So that meant each one was a standalone. And then I said, I wanted to write short paragraph chapters in the style of a certain writer. Make sure you get the arrival, the morning, the noon, and the evening of the visit in that. I did Invisible Cities from Italo Calvino. And so make sure you get it, through that. And then all I'd have to say is, in this city, here's this, and a sentence or two later, giving a paragraph. I spent most of my time reading an interactive novel that I was just writing as I went, and it was just super fun. Yeah. So you might be able to create an engagement at that level with ChatGPT that would be stellar.
Well, that exactly is where I wanted to, so saving the time of writing and making it more accessible, right? So people, they're like, oh, I don't want to write, this is so much, but if you can do that, and even if they had a bunch of interview notes, or somebody like a facilitator had a bunch of interview notes, and they started this thing with a lot of actual detail from this person's life.
That's what you got to do.
Or for the situation. I like the way you said, make it a detective story. It's a second, the detective story with a certain flavor, like more
Color it.
fictionalize it, color it, so they kind of get that safety or that humor coming out. But then I want them to take that and then say, okay, let's do some innovation and move on to, like, there's this issue with, in my case, Elder Falls was what I was focused on, people physically falling down. And how do we change that story somehow? Sorry, go ahead.
Guys, Ben wants to do a group high five. Let's do it.
Boom.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No, I actually wanted to throw out an idea into there because I think this is a really cool area. But one thing that might also be relevant here is in terms of like these other people's stories. Like I remember my grandmother actually went and like compiled a ton of family lore, like going back 400 years. And it was really kind of empowering to learn, like, here's what your ancestors did. And some pretty twisted things happen, but like really just like cool to learn.
No doubt.
But there is a sort of thing in like writer's block. It's a common issue. Like the first step is the hardest. Once you start writing, you can't stop. But like a lot of people just don't. It's like, and especially as you get older, it's harder. I'm wondering if you could do something like Eliza style. Like, what if you just use ChatGPT to interrogate people, and then what happened? Like.
Absolutely get it into a mode of, you have to sort of put it in a mindset. So imagine you're a skilled interrogator,
I have a few things I want to mention. So Steve, if you look in the Zoom chat, I popped a link in there for you. So there's a thing called like persona prompting, where what you do is you define ChatGPT's persona, just like what Philip said. Imagine you are an interrogator, you are doing this, you are doing that. You can do that. So, and there's a whole bunch of examples of persona prompting on that list, which is really, really useful for you to craft your own for what you specifically need. And then just jumping back to the story, and there was the talk of the 7 generations, but as well, and you being in Canada, it's like a lot of like the indigenous oral tradition is huge. I grew up in Northern Ontario with a lot of the native population, and I would go to powwows every summer. But a lot of this is the oral tradition of passing on stories over time, and they're never written down. They're just passed along and slightly tweaked over the years and over the generations and so on. And I love this idea of how to carry that forward. And then the interrogation idea, a friend of mine prompted ChatGPT to interview him. And gave it a quick pre-train.
Oh, yeah.
So pre-training in ChatGPT is possible, but if you could just do it in GPT-3, which works. Well, actually, ChatGPT better because it has that history. But yeah, you can put in a really quick pre-train prompt information. So my friend had written a really extensive professional biography, pasted it in there, and then asked it to interview him, and then he just basically posted an interview that ChatGPT did with him, and he thought it was amazing. And I did
really recursive. You could engineer
a
prompt that said, imagine you are a prompt engineer, and I want you to write me a prompt that will create an interviewer, and that to tell their life stories and write books or whatever you want to do.
Guys, they're blowing my mind here. Okay.
I know.
And one small thing, when you talked about the mock-up of the Google Doc, Grammarly, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, they just recently incorporated some GPT system in it, and it will not only detect your grammar, but it'll detect whether or not the thing that you just wrote is potentially a little assertive or aggressive, and it will bring up a slider where you can make it more polite or diplomatic.
So somebody's done it already. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's hilarious.
There's a thought for those who aren't going to be able to read, if it's going to be straining on their eyes on a screen or whatever. If there was a way to port this stuff into Speechify, which is like it was an app that was originally made for people who are dyslexic. You can take a picture of a page and it'll read it back to you. And with the pro versions, you can get different voices and stuff. Like finding a way to make ChatGPT conversational, so that somebody could actually like listen back to what was being read to them, or what was being written. could be a way to kind of like get it into sort of like a very sort of like human vibe.
So
without it sort of
something that
being-
was to that end, Aaron, there was something really awesome at the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab a few years ago, where you actually read it and then it reads it back to you, but as someone else for you. It's the empathy and perspective taking system that they have there. Jeremy Bailison's book about it is really interesting for getting you to be your own psychotherapist, or to get you to be seeing yourself as old, and talking in the past tense about what it is you did and things like that. Really, really interesting in terms of, like I was saying about the receptive frames, the fact that we overestimate how well we'll be able to kind of anticipate or understand things until they actually happen. Virtual reality and being able to kind of virtualize participants of conversations, but just kind of render them concretely, it has a really transformative effect on how well those stories kind of hit home. So not to add to your reading list, Steve, but I think that looking into some of the stuff from the Stanford VHIL is really interesting, and his book Experience on Demand has some really interesting sort of tidbits about the way we can overload the sensory system with more cues about what it is that we're understanding about the stories and things that could be really fun for your participants, both in terms of the telling and also the reading and the reception of these stories.
Another
I got all these here. Yeah.
crazy random thing to consider is the voice AI stuff that's going on, the voice synthesis. I don't know if you've checked out 11 Labs, but it's frightening how good of a voice sample, how little of a voice sample is required to generate a convincing AI voice. So there's a few things when I think of storytelling, I think of the storytelling being told in the voice of the storyteller. So that person could be synthesized, and then that voice could live on for generations after their death, telling the story in their own voice. And I believe it was last week or the week before last, Apple applied for a patent to apply voice synthesis to iMessage, so that I would share my voice with you. And when I send you a text message, it will read my text message in my voice for you.
Just as an aside, Keanu Reeves has disbarred anybody from doing any digital versions of his acting.
Yeah, that's going to be a thing. I go back to that movie, that based on the book, the futurist, the Congress of Futurists. I think the movie is called The Congress. Like it's a great movie because it gets into this idea of like virtual actors and an actress getting full body scanned and
well, you can see how Matrix 500 is going to want to have a virtual Neo, and I don't know how they can do that when he's in games and stuff. Like he must get to do the mocap for the games.
Yeah, I mean, he was in Cyberpunk 2077.
But how much do you want Apple? Are you then saying, okay,
yeah.
I allow you to do digital acting of my voice in the user agreement?
Yeah, reading term. Well, use GPT to summarize the terms of service.
Mind blowing. There was I Will Always Be Me with Intel and Rolls-Royce. For some weird reason, we're doing that thing about trying to capture people's voice because they had a disease that they're going to lose their own ability to communicate. And but that's another.
Is it going to be rude of me to voice throw ideas into the conversation sounding like Julian?
That'd be a new rule. No, that's fantastic. Thanks. And I got all the links. Appreciate those links. What was I thinking here? The just switching just a tiny bit, because I was just pulling up this creative brief I have with a big chart of all these different people in it. But have anybody dealt with the IFTF Institute, the RAND people that were used to do the scenario writing and stuff like that?
The Institute for the Future?
Yeah, you're talking about like the super serious people.
Yeah, I have friends that work there.
Okay,
people there. I mean, Jay McGonigal's there.
Yeah,
and I have her books here now too, because we're talking about game and making it fun and stuff.
I picture those guys trying to climb like an infinitely tall ever more teetering ladder.
Yeah, I just wondered because there was part of my thesis here is I teach the scenario method, or had been teaching it from the Shell, Royal Dutch Shell, Tina stuff way back and masters, and then I was just teaching these venture growth students in a business school the technique, and I think writing scenarios is kind of is what also led me into this area. But they're good for the person who's writing them. Fantastic if you're doing strategy and you write these things. They're useless, it seems, for everybody else. And even the guy at Shell was discouraged after 30 years of doing this. He seemed discouraged. I forget his name. But I just
Peter Wack, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there was a recent article, and so I shared that with my class too. But some of the hard cases, they really actually enjoyed the process of writing it, so that really they got a lot out of it for their case. But I just wonder, IFTF and then where that RAND, where that went from with the original RAND source. I just wondered if you guys had run into IFTF or what, or is it just like, I get a sentiment there.
I've run into them, and I've worked with some companies that are similar to IFTF and strategic foresight and scenario planning. And the net takeaway that I have is that scenario planning is definitely a very important process, but it's not storytelling. It's not the storytelling that they think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like better scenario planning has been done in science fiction films than in strategic foresight.
Yeah.
And I feel like, like the movie Contagion did a better job at, and the book Station 11 did a better job at planning a post pandemic scenario than like any of the futurists who didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
So none of the stories are that interesting. And I think that there's also this forced idea of positive futures and utopias and so on, which is fine. But to me, it's like there is no utopia without dystopia. You can't have happy people without sad people. It's two sides of the same coin. And the reality in storytelling is that really good storytelling involves intention and obstacle.
Yeah.
And people harp on like, why does every sci-fi story have to be? Well, it's because that's why they're so dystopian.
But
we want the intention, we want the obstacle, we want the drama. Otherwise, it's boring.
my counter argument to that is utopia does not solve human struggle. There'll still be broken love affairs. There'll still be unique pieces of art to be stolen.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos got a divorce.
Still gonna get a flat tire on your way to work.
Elon Musk got a divorce.
You still have all your storytelling devices. You don't.
Your utopias aren't perfect.
But my point here is that if you put a utopia in the background of the story, it's not there as just a fun. Only Star Trek has that as a fun place to run around and storytell. The rest of the world just says, "Oh, we got a utopia here. Let's just poison it in the background so that we don't really actually ever believe in pursuing utopias." I mean, that's the net effect as far as I can see it. People just don't believe in them. You don't believe in them because
utopia also literally the definition of a place that doesn't exist.
So it's our dreams. It's something to head towards. It's nonetheless worthy of consideration. It's not automatically poison. Dystopic clearly is a distinction for a reason. It's not conflated.
I feel obligated to just do my usual disclaimer, which is design fiction is not stories.
Mm-hmm.
There implications of stories. So it's not. This isn't a science fiction. But if it were, and someone said like, "Hey, this is design fiction," it's like, what about it is? It looks to me like a science fiction novel.
Is that a defensive maneuver to not be undercut, or to be is that meaning to make it a little bit more serious?
There's an important distinction that I think is avoided if you just say like, well, isn't all science fiction? I wrote a science fiction story. It's a design fiction. It's like, well, why do you feel the need to describe your science fiction story as design fiction? And B, the expression of a fiction as implied through a material artifact is very different. And I'm not saying it because it's like I want to be different. I'm saying because I think that there's a different kind of value associated with that kind of representation of a possible world. And it's more that like, look,
I think
why
it makes
conflate
it
the things?
Seem more possible. Is that what you mean?
It's for me being like more of a hands-on kind of guy. Yes, tangible. That's it. Like and I think the difference is like really compelling. And I struggle when people want to say when they want to conflate them. And I think they do it naturally. I don't think they're doing it because they want to be difficult or kind of academically pedantic. It's more like, you know, you think of the way you get this. I'm preaching to the converted, but it's like, think of the way if I said like, this is a thing I found from the future, is very different from, hey, here's a draft of 20 pages of a story that I wrote about a thing from the future. When you read the thing, you're like, okay, this guy wrote something about the future. I'm reading it now. I don't feel like I'm there.
Did you ever get into Dave Lyons, to Ari Hollander's Glow VR?
Dave, I remember. Ari, I do not.
So Ari built on top of Unity and a heart monitor, a VR that was called Glow, and it had lightning bugs blinking by the side of a quiet lake, and nice kind of cricket sound. And basically, as you brought your hands together, a light beam, and it had very, very good hand tracking. It was the first VR I was in where I wasn't, oh, you didn't immediately just cut my hands off. Because you really felt like you were in there. And so when you put your hands, I'm trying to get this on camera. When you put your hands like this beam would form and it would draw the lightning bugs to you. And the volume of the sphere of lightning bugs you could capture was proportional to your own heart rate. And
is that
so
the link, Brandel, is that precisely what Random's talking about? Brandel found a link to a video. Found a video.
Yeah, there might be a link to it. And so
it's from Hollander's LinkedIn.
Yeah, and so you got better at collecting lightning bugs the more calm you became. And he used this. He proved 50% reduction in pain levels in opiate-using cancer patients that persisted for up to 3 fucking days. 3 fucking days. This stuff could reduce pain by 50% for up to 3 days in cancer patients. That's
Benjamin,
just like that would stop the whole
high-fiving again, or
opiate,
is your hand still there?
That would stop the whole opiate addiction. Are you pro? Is there some kind of transmission?
Benjamin's hand is still up, but I don't know if that's from
I
before.
think it froze. I think
sorry,
we've had some freezing.
He's
okay.
I'm stuck.
Sorry. So anyway, that sense of having the environment respond directly to your heart rate exteriorize this most internal thing into an environmental cue. And I think that that's one of the things, somehow that resonated with what was just being talked about. That
interesting stuff. This leads me back though to the weakness though in the scenarios, and then I like Jillian, thank you, because I am newbie, like, you know, making that differential, because we nobody means any disrespect to the work, but what we're missing here is character, because to get resonance, and I think I heard the word compelling, out of a fiction, whether it be the physical object or a written, what seemed to be missing to me in those scenarios was character, because how do I put myself into the story? And you just nailed it, Jillian. How do I put myself in that story, in that manuscript, unless I can relate and resonate with those characters in there? If I can't do that, then it's just words on a page. And then I like the tangibility, because I also like to fiddle and make stuff, but not to the level you guys are doing. But it's just that having that. So to me, it's almost like a way to have something jump out of the story. So if you're writing this is where my thought went after our coffee, is that if I'm writing these stories and I'm trying to make them super compelling and character driven and using all these techniques to affect the neuro brain, and I think that's the key thing, is that it lasts. Like when you do this right and people resonate, it does last in their mind, and it actually could change mindsets. And then if there's something that comes out of that story, like physically, I can now see this thing.
It's the wallet, right?
Yeah.
So you do the design fiction as the archetype of the wallet, or a dossier that you found. I mean, you know, you're getting into like ARG kind of stuff.
But I work it into the story as though, just as you're doing, is just an everyday occurrence within that. And I actually want to send you this little short story I wrote,
please,
Mind Stack Switch, because it has all of this stuff wrapped in it. And yet one of my key informants read this story, and she wanted to meet Bill, the protagonist in the story. She wants to get back dating again. I want to meet a guy like that. Because when I write first of all for women. I don't want to get into gender stuff, but I write for the female mindset as I know it, and I want them to be attracted to what I'm writing. And so But if that then helps everybody else to get into it, anyway, it just you guys just blew a bunch of neurons for me, because this is
This
again,
happens to me. I just start
Yeah.
talking and
you
it
just
seems
added like
clear.
6 months to my doctor.
Oh yeah, O'Reilly Auto Parts has some spare neurons on sale this weekend. If you go there
Just
and
get
pick some
that
up.
fiber tape. Make sure it's the reinforced fiber tape. Benjamin does seem frozen to me again.
He does. He's a very still guy.
He's very still.
Benjamin, were you
like
taking
a deer.
furious? Were you taking furious notes, Benjamin, or were you drawing? Or were you
No,
drawing
I'm
some
making
stuff?
a slide deck actually for a thing for a client thing. So I'm drawing the slides since it's
Nice.
like
That's
prototype
great.
level sketches, and I hate to present like clip art, but I also hate to present things that are like more finished than they are. I think it's good to have like a style to the whole thing, since everyone then sees it and knows where it came from. But yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, it's something to draw.
Clip art's
Yeah.
overrated.
It's also fun.
Yeah.
Clip
All
art.
my slides are Mid-Journey now.
Yeah.
All my presentations are drafted in ChatGPT, rendered in Mid-Journey.
Yeah, and then your client's like,
38
"Oh, cool, we're
seconds.
done. You're done,
Yep.
right?" Is that?
So you guys mentioned MVP earlier, but to me, this is all like you guys are building MVPs in the truest sense of Steve Blank kind of stuff, right? Where you're not actually trying to build kind of a finished like working product. You're building the thing that everybody gets behind and says, "Oh yeah, we can make that reality." So is that does that come up in your work, like where you're actually making the MVP for a team that's trying to do a startup or figure something out?
I would say, okay, I have a thought on MVP. MVP is an interesting word because it's like that, the Silicon Valley expression that's used for these people who define their jobs as my life purpose, and that we're going to create a technology that is going to change the world with a minimum viable product. Like, no, that's so for me, I think the minimum viable product in art, it's like, yeah, I think there's something there. Yeah, sure. Maybe we should do this. Like, do you think it's got some legs? I don't know. Let's do this. And then to me, that's an MVP. Like, I feel it works well. We don't know what it is. We're going to try something. We're going to see how it goes. And our ambitions, we have these latent ambitions, but it's not a grandiose thing. We try stuff. We just do stuff. We try stuff. And I like the word MVP in that context, but I do think MVP is a funny word, a funny expression.
What's the relationship between MVP and low hanging fruit?
Oh, that's just buzzwords. I mean, we can circle back and take this offline.
No, but I think low
And we
hanging
can leverage synergies across multiple touch points.
What's an easy thing to drop that we could do out of these ideas, and just that's something you do all the time, Julian. What's adjacently near that would become real for people to pick up? Right.
Well, I think that's the idea, right? Like you're trying to say, is this accessible? Can I get into that somehow? Or
I would say like part of this adjacently near stuff is even just the Mid-Journey AI stuff that we were all starting to play with, and it led to the Solar Punk book that we're kind of creating, but we're doing it a little bit more elaborately than the guy who said I made a children's book in 72 hours. We've got an idea behind it. We've got a vision for what it stands for, and the art is there to complement the bigger idea, but helps support that idea. So, it's adjacent and it's not that far off. And I think it's going to be something that we see a lot more often in the world of content.
Nice. Okay. Well, thanks for addressing.
I think we're going to see a lot of it in content. I think we're going to have personal bubbles of it. It's going to be hard to tell people apart because they're going to, like, if AR glasses drop and people are wearing info bubbles, the whole thing is just going to become surreal. People aren't going to be able to tell. Like, I think it's going to be bad personally, because the inability to already tell what's real and not real is clearly been exposed. Let's put it that way. It's clearly been exposed. And so then when you start feeding people genuinely different information all the time, it's just going to continue to diverge. So unless there's some embedding matrix that holds us together that I don't see yet, maybe it's the technical infrastructure itself, because the capital structure itself wants to be able to keep selling objects. So that's where it becomes self-fulfilling in some fashion. But you have to figure out what are the, like, why would anybody be given a universal basic income unless they're somehow, like, I don't get it. It's like it's a lemming thing, maybe.
Reminding me of universal income of I forget what Robert Heinlein's book where they have the dividend, right? Everybody gets a dividend.
Is that in Stranger in a Strange Land?
Yeah, either or in Caddy Walks Through Walls, or The Door into Summer. I can't remember. One of those. But yeah, that was the first time I had encountered that idea.
Great thinker, he'd be canceled.
Yeah, these days probably. Yeah.
Yeah. No way.
Yeah. Sorry, my wife's asking me a question here. Yeah, I think it's I think that's where you either cry or you laugh. So there's I don't know what to do on that one. But
I've been through enough changes that I know to laugh, but I don't think everybody else will have that same sense.
No, as you said earlier, people get too serious about it, and then you're sitting there like, shooting meta jokes out that only half the people are getting. That could be a bit of a problem with the approach, yeah, for sure. So, but I guess that's where I fall back to this idea of compelling, resonant fiction, and it's just because that's where I'm at right now. But I do, as the maker builder guy, I love the idea of kind of the marriage of these two things together, and then people can make their own decisions. They touch it, they read it, they then start to make their own decisions. So we're not trying to force them to do anything. We're not trying to. And if the humor engages them more deeply and maybe stop some of the crying, then
well, I think material shit will make a difference. That's one thing that will stop the crying, and that's one reason for universal basic income, because like they know the number. If you look at the graph of income to food costs, they know how different those can be before you get riots. So they'll stay attentive to that. Plus, what if 3D printers, you could print your own poop into anything new you wanted,
like cookies?
Yeah,
you just eat that. The virtuous cycle of poop filament.
Just go get a nice dinner that you know has a bunch of the raw products, and come home, crap it into your toilet, put your sim in, and then you got your new Frisbee.
It's a different kind of chicken into a different kind of bucket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. How do you like my new lunchbox?
Yeah, no, how far away are we?
Yeah, exactly.
The replicator using anything, or Mr. Fusion, I guess, would be the other one.
Yeah, when I think of universal basic income, I think of like I went on a rant the other day in general seminar about work and how important I think work is, and I think it's an absolutely vital thing to do. And when I say work, I don't mean the extractive 9-to-5 stuff that you do for people, but like the thing you do, to achieve your goal and your ambition, right? And it could be art, it could be carpentry, it could be helping people, it could be volunteering. To me, that's work. And I think that when you wake up in the morning, there's what drives you, what's the thing that you want to do? And unless you're physically or mentally unable to do that, then I think everyone else should just work, like offer value, put value into the world. And not dream of this free handout world that we live in, because the reality is that there are like basic metabolic needs that we need. We need warmth, we need food, and if we weren't sitting on a Zoom call right now, we'd probably be in the woods, like hunting an animal or farming some land, or raising some chickens and having lots of kids, so we have more free labor on the farm. Like everyone worked once upon a time. So why are we not putting work on a pedestal, not in the Silicon Valley, multiple side hustles, under hustles, over hustles type of mentality, but what's the thing that you're going to do? What value you're going to add to the world? And let's focus on adding value to the world. I work on design fiction every day.
I've
Like,
been
I want
about
that.
the
I want
hunting
that to be my thing.
squirrels. We don't have
Yeah.
to hunt squirrels anymore. So- or
Squirrels
when I
are
go,
gross. Yeah.
when I go get takeout from our favorite restaurant before Skip the Dishes, and I do know the founder of Skip the Dishes, but and we're copied that. But that idea, I used to do that all the time. Like, honey, I'm gonna go hunt it. I'm gonna go out and hunt down dinner because she was pregnant at the time, and bring it back. And I
Right.
go to her favorite restaurants and get her dessert from here and ribs from there, whatever, right? And then I bring it back and I'm like, look, I went and hunted down and killed dinner.
See,
and
if you went to the restaurant in the back alley and opened the back door and snuck through the kitchen and grabbed it off of the thing before the guy, like, that would be like, that's kind of fun. That's restaurant hunting. That's awesome.
that I would love to write that story. I think that'd be a fun little like short story. So like, what would this go like? How would this happen? What would turn out? How much danger would I be in?
Again, I'm drawn to the Hollywood scenarios, the future scenarios that they spell for like zombie futures and whatever you see in the movies. But like, what are the actual, is there any model besides like Kurzweil singularity that you guys have developed or you reference or say, if this happened this way? Or like when I was developing software, we would keep a feature timeline of this will happen, that'll happen, this will happen, that'll happen. And so anything that we came up with conceptually, we could put on a map somewhere in some kind of insane person's bedroom that had all of the strings between all of the things, and we could put the index cards on that and represent all the timelines of all the, you know, what is the design fiction, the DFU? Julian, you're quiet. The multiverse.
What's DFU?
The design fiction universe.
Oh, design fiction universe.
The design fiction multiverse. I want to know, like, a map. I wanted to map to the design fiction multiverse.
Yeah, I think that maybe the closest we got, Dre, you'll remember this, like way back in the day where there was like Ari's Underverse. Remember we were playing, we were going to be like I don't know what it is, but there's a character who's a recurring character in different design fictions. I call him Ari Birnbaum because that's how he was first incarnated, and he was a bit of had a license to the photography, and it's just a guy standing there and looks like he could sell anything from real estate to insurance and this kind of thing. And so Ari came back when we were working on, what do we call that project?
He was a real person or a fictional person?
The AV project?
No, it was way before that. It was like
oh, was it the
ship it was the ship thing.
Yeah, it was the Filthy Lucre
project. And so I was like, because everyone was like, metaverse, did you get any land in the metaverse? And so in that kind of swirl of like beautiful confusion and kind of, you know, a little bit like FOMO, should I get some land in the metaverse? Like, how do you even get land in the, and what is that land? And Jed was like taking us on tours of it, and I was like, we need a real estate guy. And so Ari Birnbaum became the real estate guy for the, and I just called it the Underverse. I don't know why. It wasn't the metaverse. It was like, you know, I don't know.
Sure.
Just silly. But then
I like it.
That was kind of fun. Actually, he's going to be in an ad in the 10th edition of TBD catalog to keep Ari in the mix. And it was just, you know, it was just as silly as all the, you know, beautifully silly, not dismissively silly.
We had a character who didn't have a name, but we just called him Mr. Statistical Necessity. And he had 2.3 kids. And, you know, he was somebody had to, you know, be the 1 out of 10 people who got hit by a bus. So it was him, you know.
Yeah.
Dre, it's interesting talking to you. I'd be happy to chat offline more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how to find people on Discord from Zoom. The crossover is sort of difficult for me.
Yeah, I mean, I just go by my own name over
there.
And you're random? Is that?
Yeah, I'm random.
Yeah.
Random, yeah.
Steve, are you on the Discord?
I am on the Discord. Yeah.
What's your handle?
It was Panda Daddy. I did change it. Try to change it just to my first name, Steve.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Panda Daddy. It's my family Discord. I've only ever used it for my family. So you guys are using Discord even.
Don't even worry about it, Panda Daddy.
This is like my second family, so I'm good.
Second, now that I know your name, that's great.
It seems it just seems to dovetail for my life. Yeah. So what are we looking at? Oh, this is the thing.
This is
Yeah,
one
this
of
is
the
the
one of the ads that
Underverse
we
ad.
mocked up for Ari Birnbaum and
Underverse.
Associates Metaverse Realty.
Full stack broker.
Yeah. There were a
Nice.
bunch of other ones. I like this guy. Is just kind of like the tech guy with an old Toshiba laptop. Like, Ari, it's not working. You know, something like that.
I just like for work, play both or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I love that. Imagining problems people will have in the future. It's great.
Yeah.
That's
Awesome.
Well, and that's the thing is that it'll just be even funnier than we can probably think of. But that's, yeah, I'm excited about this whole thing and to be part of this. So thank you so much for
Yeah, man. Thanks for
helping me out
rolling in.
today. Dre, are you from North Bay or Timmins or?
I'm originally from Sudbury,
Oh,
but
Sudbury. Oh,
I'm in Toronto now.
okay, okay, gotcha. Yeah, no. My dad was from North Bay. His whole family,
Nice.
Trois-Rivières. There's like I got Indigenous blood, French, and Scottish. I'm like, that's the perfect.
Toronto's great.
Canadian. But yeah, I grew up near Toronto and then came out to the mountains, and I'm not going back. So have to visit maybe. So, but yeah, I can think I figure out how to navigate and find you on all of you guys on Discord. So, but I have to bounce myself now too. So.
Yeah, ditto. I got
But
more
you-
calls to do.
You just moved my work forward.
Awesome.
Awesome. That's great. I'd like to
So-
hear that for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, good.
Guys.
All right. There's
I'm gonna bounce too. Good time. Noon.
Peace on earth.
They were
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. High five.
Take care, gang.
Yeah. Hi. See
Peace
you
on
guys.
earth. Take care for now.
Have a great weekend.
You too.